Thank you.
So, guys, welcome back to the second day. And if you recall, yesterday we were talking about some frameworks. We talked about NIST and CSF, etc. Today we talk about COBIT, right? So, if you recall, we touched briefly about COBIT yesterday, and I must have told you that it is considered the most comprehensive framework for IT controls. Absolutely comprehensive. Again, as I told you, you will not get specific questions or in-depth questions about any of these frameworks. In fact, for COBIT itself, there is a training program of 5 days or so. I have long ago studied COBIT. It is very, very exhaustive. Every aspect of IT, it gives you what to do, look for, and how to build a program. So, COBIT, what you should remember is that it is considered the most comprehensive control when it comes to IT. Right? It's a comprehensive governance framework. The idea is to balance IT value, risk, and resource usage. So, IT should give value. It facilitates a holistic management of IT, all aspects of IT, across both business and technical domains. Guys, except when you want to speak, please mute yourselves. Farhan, Puneet, please mute yourselves. Okay, I'm muting you. Yeah, when you want to speak, unmute yourselves. At other times, mute yourselves. Okay, the idea is, if you recall, we said ultimately technology has to serve business. So here the idea is you should be able to control uh, the mm, the organization across all domains, both business and technical. There are two basic principles here. One is governance, right? And a framework on the basis of which you can build a governance system for your organization. The idea is to help you in decision making, risk management, and stakeholder communication. COVID has been defined in such a way that you can apply to any organization, big or small. You can apply to any environment. Could be in-house. It could be on the cloud. You may be using different models, DevOps, DevSecOps, etc. In whatever you use, this is a model which you can modify and use. Okay, it drives enterprise-wide security by end to end. It defines end to end
Adeno.
responsibility. Guys, please mute yourselves. Please, guys. Muhammad, mute yourself. Mehdi, mute yourself. Yeah, yeah. End-to-end responsibilities again across business, align security with enterprise objectives, which we have talked about. We should be able to manage risk, business continuity, compliance, and resilience. These are some of the major concerns we have when we are setting up a security program. And remember, CIA, availability, protection, cost, and control of IT services. This, incidentally, COBIT is brought about by ISACA. There's another certification for audit called CISA. You might have heard of it. The same organization has brought about the COBIT framework, right? In COBIT, it identifies internal and external stakeholders. Who are your internal stakeholders? Your board, of course, executive management, business managers, because ultimately we're here to serve business, IT managers, assurance providers like compliance, like internal audit, and of course, risk management. Don't forget the external stakeholders, most important of which are your regulators, then your various business partners and any IT vendors who provide services to you. Guys, I'm tired of this. Why can't people mute themselves? Sachin, please mute yourself. We can all hear you clearing your throat. Okay. Okay, now come to COVID governance principles. Guys, I reiterate for everyone, please mute yourselves when you want to speak, unmute yourself. After that, mute yourself. Right? Okay. Now, the idea of COBIT, if you recall, as I said a moment ago, it is comprehensive. These are the elements of COBIT. Okay, let's discuss what it is. There are multiple stakeholders in an organization. Like, who are the stakeholders? it's your employees, it's your management, it's your shareholders, it is your clients, it is society at large. Sometimes the requirements of stakeholders may be contrary to each other. They may have different requirements. You have to balance, you have to do the best you can for all the stakeholders and to give them values. Your system of controls that you have should be able to manage everything holistically. See, there are some frameworks which don't talk about physical security, right? Here you have to talk about all aspects, holistic. It should be dynamic. Dynamic means when there is a change in design, we should consider the impact. When we change something, the controls may change, the implications may change. All that has to be considered. This, in my opinion, is one of the most important distinctions about COBIT. It believes in a complete separation between governance and management. If you recall, yesterday we talked a bit about it. We said the job of exercising oversight over executive management is that of the board. Many governance failures all over the world, if you study them, what you will find is management sometimes, for whatever reason, took risks which were not acceptable, and the board did not exercise oversight over them, right? We should be able to customize this, prioritize according to your needs, according to your organization. So, this is something which you can use for any organization, and it should cover the entire organization end to end. COBIT divides the objectives into governance objectives and management objectives. What are management objectives? APO, align, plan, and organize. That means when we want to build anything, we have to make sure it's aligned with the organizational goals, plan it, and then organize it. Next is BAI, build, acquire, and implement. Meaning, when we require a system, if we have in-house expertise, we may build it ourselves. If not, we may have to acquire it. In either case, we want to make sure that it's according to our security requirements, and we have to implement it, meaning we have to test it and make sure it is satisfactory and then put it into production. The next is DSS, deliver, service, and support. That means once it's ready, we deliver it to the business users. It's in production, start using it. Now, when they are using it, obviously it has to be maintained. Obviously, they need changes. All this during this period, we have to continue giving them support. If you recall, yesterday we said a control that we put in at a certain point of time may work very effectively, but down the line, 6 months later, we don't know how it will work. So the idea is change management. You have to keep testing your controls again and again. This is where this comes in. Monitor, evaluate, and assess. Keep monitoring your systems, evaluate if it's working properly, if not, make changes. The governance objectives are evaluate, direct, and monitor. Remember, this sounds a little like management objectives, but this is being done at a different level. This is being done at the level of the board of directors. This is why it is very important. The board of directors has to exercise oversight over executive management, right? Sometimes management may get carried away. What happens is this. Typically, the remuneration that management gets depends on profits, the bonuses that they get. Sometimes, in the quest for profits, they take risks which should not be taken. It's for the board of directors to make sure that this doesn't happen. Chandra Mohan, please mute yourself. Guys, if this happens again, I'll mute everybody. If you want to unmute and talk, you'll have to raise a hand, then I'll unmute you. I can't spend half the time telling everybody, please mute yourself, please mute yourself. Okay, now come to enterprise architecture. Now, how did enterprise architecture begin? This concept started in the 1980s when organizations began using technology in a large way. And even at that time, back in the 1980s, see, today it's very clear to us that we have to manage technology, that it has to be aligned with business objectives. But back in the 1980s, they realized that without a long term plan and strategy, your IT will not be aligned with business objectives. You need a long term plan and strategy to make sure that technology remains aligned with business objectives. Today, the concept of enterprise architecture has gone a little further. The concept of architecture today is all parts of the organization should be aligned to and support the business objectives. If you recall, what are the objectives of information security? We have to support business objectives. What are the objectives of IT? We have to support business objectives because the organization has been set up for business objectives, right? This is to make sure all parts of the organization are working towards the same goal. Have you noticed that sometimes that doesn't seem to happen? There are ego clashes between people in the same organization. They tend to pull in different directions. Have you noticed that? Have you come across that sometimes?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is true. I'll
There's more of an official politics, right?
Yeah, lot of politics. But one thing I would want to say is, once I came across an amazing amount of maturity from a very young person. You might have seen yesterday on the slide, I told you, I also mentor young bankers in the UAE. So one young lady, she was hardly 23 or 24, who had joined in IT and she was put in the help desk as part of her training. So she told me, by the time people call the help desk, they're already very irritated and angry and they snap at me, but I don't get offended because I realize that both they and I are working towards the same objective, which is we want to give good service to our customers. I understand that their frustration is not directed towards me, but towards the system. I was amazed. I told her at your age, I didn't have that maturity, right? Pretty impressive, right? Somebody 23 or 24 years old having that maturity. So, enterprise architecture is about the analysis, design, and implementation of the organization in order to successfully execute business strategy. We need to understand enterprise architecture to make sure that the projects that we execute are accomplishing the business objectives, that they're aligned with the business objectives. If you look at some major projects that have failed, you will find that it is not actually geared towards business objectives. There are cases when people execute big projects, organizations execute big projects with what do you say, with the underlying motives. Somebody wants to someone to get a contract, they want to get some kickbacks, that kind of thing. Here it's important that whatever we are doing is for the furtherance of our enterprise objectives. Now, this is enterprise architecture. Next is subdivision of that or a subset of that is enterprise security architecture. What this means is when we need some security solution, adopt a holistic kind of approach. For example, let's say some parts of our organization, some verticals are handling sensitive data. We need an encryption solution. Rather than ask each vertical to go and acquire its own solution, say for encryption, it's much better to give it in one place and say, okay, whoever uses it, requests it, will use this. So tell me, what is the advantage of having these security services in a central place rather than decentralized? Is there advantage, or do you think decentralized is better?
Centralized is better because of
Centralized
command and
better.
control.
Exactly, and uniformity. Otherwise, what will happen? One has a certain priority, another has a certain priority, and maintaining consistency, ensuring that your policies are implemented is much easier when you do it in one place rather than distributed. This is why security architecture comes in. Give it all in one place. Basically, your enterprise security architecture is made up of your policies, your procedures, and processes, which ensure that we all operate in a certain fashion. Strategically, tactically, and operationally, we are similar. The idea of enterprise architecture is look at the big picture. Don't look at it piecemeal. Have your solution security in a central place where multiple applications, systems, business processes can leverage it as per requirement. Right? Yes, Abhishek, you raised a hand.
Daniel, I wanted to know
Hmm.
when we said that centralized enterprise architecture is good. So,
Hmm.
what is your view on like having the organization's perspective or organization's need? Because sometimes decentralization also would make sense based on the
No, that's
organization.
correct. No, whatever I said is not a blanket rule. I wanted you to understand that having a centralized security architecture has some merits. You're right in saying that in certain situations, for example, let's say you're an MNC that operates in different areas. So different countries may have different requirements. In such cases, you may adopt a decentralized, or what some organizations do is the core of it is centralized, right? For example, privacy. Let's say you're an organization that operates in multiple geographies. So you have in your policy for privacy, you have a core which is common across the board. You will have customization for each geography in which you operate. Right? Clear?
Yes, makes sense.
Okay. Now, one of the architecture models we talk about is SABSA, right? Remember, this is a business architecture framework. SABSA stands for Sherwood Applied Business Architecture. So after the guy who created it, John Sherwood. Okay, now one thing when we talk about enterprise architecture, there's also something called Zachman. Earlier in the before they revised it, Zachman was also part of the common body of knowledge. Now it is not there. So believe me when I tell you that on Sabsa and Zachman architecture, and even something like TOGAF, which is originally a US military framework, whole books have been written. So here, what this exam expects us to do is to have a high level appreciation of what this model is about. Okay, you don't go very deep. You recall what we said yesterday. It's a mile wide and an inch thick. So, this is a comprehensive framework for risk driven enterprise security architecture. Remember a few keywords. It is risk driven, the focus is on risk. The core principles of SABSA are these, as always, business driven. Whatever you do, your security strategy should be aligned with business objectives. Risk, as we said yesterday, everything we look, risk permeates every aspect of our decision. So, what this says is at every phase, you are going to embed risk management into the life cycle. It's also a life cycle approach in the sense security begins right at the beginning, at the requirements. It doesn't end till destruction. Later in domain 2, even when you're destroying old records, there are different ways of destroying. Let's say there's a record retention policy. You are getting rid of some old data. If it is something very sensitive, even the destroyed data, you may not want anyone to be able to get hold of it. For example, let's say you are in something like a military or something like space research or something. There is some hard disk after retention policy. You have to uh, get rid of this. If it's not so sensitive, we may erase the data, clear the data, and reuse it. Whereas if it is something very sensitive, your policy may say physically destroy this. We may be losing some money by destroying a perfectly good hard drive. But the implications of this falling into the wrong hands are much more serious. So, here, this is the same idea. You have to think of security in every aspect, right till retirement. Even at the time of destroying the data, you have to think of security. It should be adaptable and scalable. It's something which could be used by a small organization, big organization, sometimes some things which have complex reporting lines, multiple verticals, etc. It should be modular. Modular means it is not monolithic. Sometimes if you have a monolithic structure, it is difficult to remove one part without affecting other parts. The idea here is make it all modular so that let's say some component is not relevant to you. You should be able to remove it without affecting the rest of it. Suppose you want to add something, you should be able to add it without having to affecting the rest of it. Okay. This is an enterprise a security framework around which you can build the individual architecture of your organization. Lakshmi Narayan, you raised a hand. ST, you're unmuted. Please mute yourself. Yes, Lakshmi Narayan, go ahead.
Actually, the all of the model which is right now discussed, while
Mhm.
implementing is that the cost will be very higher than that risk actually.
That's correct. It's always expensive because implementing it across your organization is a challenge, undoubtedly. But here we are talking only about the principle. Whether you can afford it, whether the budget is too much, is not something we go into for the purpose of this exam. You're right in saying that when it comes to implementation, you have to consider the cost. Okay, now this is a layered framework, right? Each layer describes a different perspective, right? This will be clear in a moment. This is risk driven. That means at every stage you're looking at risk and a chain of traceability. Remember this keyword, a chain of traceability, and moving from policy to practical implementation. What it means is at the top level, at the highest level, you have a policy. And based on that policy, as you drill down, you come up with concrete controls. For example, let's say down at the grassroots, you have some feature of access management. Everything you're doing, every control you're implementing at the grassroots level should be traceable to a high level objective. Suppose we are doing something which has no relevance to a objective of the organization. An obvious question we should ask ourselves is, why are we doing this? Do you remember? I think yesterday I mentioned that sometimes there may be some old controls in our organization which are no longer relevant because we reorganized the way we were working. For example, once, let's say, we were a brick and mortar company, we had some controls in place. Now we are all online. Now, the same controls may not be required. We need other controls for the environment or the new business model that we have. At times like this, we should say everything that we are doing, is it related to a high level policy? If it is not useful, should we drop it? Right? So at every layer, we have to ask what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Etc. So here, if you see here, there are different layers: contextual, conceptual, logical, etc. So what exactly do these layers mean? Contextual means we should understand. Contextual is the business view. We should view everything. Actually, the same things, points we talked about come here. The terminology may be different. Everything we do in security should be aligned with the business goals and objectives. Next is conceptual. Okay, you have a certain objective. In order to create that control, we need to have an architecture, concepts, and strategies. I mean, here's a very simple example to understand what we mean by architecture in this context, right? What is architecture? Let's say you want to build a house. Can we start building a house right away? It won't last very long, right? We have a plan. Your architect comes and draws a plan. This is where your living room will be. This is where your kitchen will be. This is where the bedrooms will be. These are the walls, etc. Based on that, your engineer starts building. The same thing applies here. When you're building a system, we should have the idea or the concepts and then how to execute them. Right, guys? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Next is logical. Once we have the concepts in place, we should have an outline, a design, right, of the security components, how it will interact with the rest of the system. For example, if it is giving some data, is it encrypting the data? What is the nature of the data? Are the APIs secure? All these are the questions we have to ask. Next is physical. Sorry. Here we build it down into a physical system, physical implementation of the control. This is called the builder view, right? Next is the tradesman view. Okay, we have built something. Now we need the specifications, right? It's like your configuration, the technical specifications for every security component. It could be a firewall, it could be an operating system. So detailed configuration and settings. Finally, at the operational level, right? The people who are operating it, how do we operate it? How do we make sure that it remains secure? So if you look at it under these layers, you can see every aspect of the system being used in the organization, Right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
now come to PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. It was created by four major credit card companies: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express. Remember one thing: PCI DSS is a contractual requirement. It is not a legal requirement, it's a contractual requirement. There are several, I mean, you don't need to remember how many: 200 security controls, 12 requirements, etc. And just take a look at the high level controls. Very basic. What does it say? Install and maintain a firewall configuration, right? You have to protect your networks. Don't use vendor supplied defaults, change the defaults. Cardholder data should be protected, it should always be encrypted. Encrypt transmission. Whenever you're sending cardholder data anywhere, make sure you encrypt it. Protect your systems against malware. Keep regularly updating your anti malware. When you're developing systems, use a secure methodology, SDLC. Restrict access to cardholder data on a need to know basis. We talked about it yesterday. Identify and authenticate access to system components. Don't, before anyone, any human being or any process accesses anything, they should be authenticated. Restrict physical access. Physical security is also important. Track and monitor access to all network resources and cardholder data. This means you must be logging what happens, you must be monitoring the logs, you must be analyzing the logs. If there is anything anomalous, anything suspicious, that we should act upon it. Restrict physical access. Yeah, regularly test security requirements. Remember yesterday, PCI DSS, you have to keep testing your things. Maintain a policy that addresses information security for all personnel. Human beings, see, human beings are our most valuable asset. Unfortunately, they are also the weakest link in security. They're the weakest link in security. This is why awareness trainings are so important. Incidentally, PCI DSS was last revised a few years ago, and from 2024, the fourth version is effective. You don't need this, this is just for information. What you need to remember is this is not in a legislation. This is an industry standard. This enforces security standards across different jurisdictions. It doesn't matter which part of the world you're in. If you're processing cardholder data, you have to abide by this. Since it's not a legislation, it is not overseen by any government body. But if you fail to comply, these four major card organizations which set it up may disallow you. They may say, okay, from tomorrow we are not going to let you process the data. Yes, Abhishek, you raised a hand.
Just wanted to know, just PCDSS also applies for the RuPay card?
I don't know. I guess it does. It must be applying for RuPay.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Okay.
The thing is this, focuses on international certifications. So local things, for example, um, I can talk about privacy, but DPDP I don't know very much about, right? Just an overview. And in any case, in this exam, RuPay they will not ask you. Okay. In fact, they won't ask you about MasterCard or anything. Remember what we said? It is all vendor agnostic.
Uh,
Okay. Now, yeah.
so,
Now,
so
yeah.
sorry, Daniel. My understanding, I think RuPay by default would be complying with these standards. This is my understanding because
Okay.
always,
No,
always
as I
global.
said, it's not very relevant for our training program. So that's why I
Okay.
don't want to spend time on it. We can discuss it offline if you wish.
Yes, it's
Right?
not about any rupee or any card. It's something that if you are processing any card information, either you're, when I say processing, so there are two
Yeah.
steps. Like either you are processing or storing any card
Okay.
information, then you must be PCIs. You must have PCI DSS.
Yep.
Okay. Guys, let's go on. FedRAMP is the next one. FedRAMP stands for Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. Now, this is a standard meant to provide standard reusable approach to security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring for cloud products and services across the US government. The name is good, RAMP. this is a standard which they created for any US government organization which wants to put its data on the cloud, right? So what did they do? There's a NIST standard, Special Publication 800-53. Based on that, they created a standard to ensure that cloud service providers meet the rigorous cybersecurity requirements before they work with federal agencies, because the data of the US government is with them. So they said this is a standard you have to meet. So by creating transparent standards to process for security authorizations, they allow agencies to leverage security authorizations on a government wide scale. Now, what this means is before FedRAMP came by, what happened was, let's say there are multiple agencies of the US government. Let's say agency X wants to put one, guys, let's say, or let's say, put it this way, there's an organization called X, right? This guy approaches a US government agency called A, right? And says, okay, you can put your data. They agree on something. This agency has to evaluate, do you meet our requirements? Then this guy decides he'll give the same service to another agency. B has to evaluate all over again. So here what they said is, in one place we'll have one standard. If you comply with this, you can process the data of any US government agency. This is why they call it standardized reusable approach. You don't, next time you want to put it on any other government agency, you don't have to go through the process again. Once you have it, you can reuse it. So once a cloud service provider has been authorized, the security package can be used by any federal agencies. So this is what I was saying. Before FedRAMP, every agency had to do its own security checks, which was expensive and sometimes inconsistent. Remember what we said. If you have a central control, you can maintain consistency. If multiple organizations are trying to implement their own controls, it will be inconsistent. Their motto is do once, use many times, right? Once you do this, you reuse this assessment to do the work for any other federal government. The important things you must remember is this: FedRAMP provides a reusable approach. Once an organization is certified under FedRAMP, they can do work for any US government agency. Okay, guys, is that clear? Well,
Yes. Yes.
good.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now we come to the concepts of due diligence and due care. Okay, I'll come to that blurb later. Okay, what is due diligence? Due diligence means prior planning. You're doing it to make sure you don't have any problems down the line. You're doing things in advance. Do you remember the other day we were talking about due diligence exercise? We were talking about mergers and acquisitions, right? We said before you buy up anything or you merge, you'll ask your accountants to check the financial statements. You'll ask your security team to go and check the security policy to the security posture, because you don't want to have a problem later, right? This means putting in place governance structures, processes to protect your organization. It is basically preparatory work, research. Suppose, let's say, you are going to expand into another country or you're buying an organization in another country, you must understand what are their laws and regulations. Examples of due diligence are having a governance structure in place, creating policies, procedures. Let's say we are setting up an organization. First, we should have a security policy, right? Cybersecurity program, controls, carry out vulnerability scans, firewalls, countermeasures, etc. We'll come back to this blurb after we talk about due care. Due care is what any reasonable person would do under the circumstances. Due diligence is making sure you have a framework, you have a policy in place to protect your organization. What if that remains only on paper? Nobody is doing it. What is the use of it? Due care is actually practicing it, doing all the individual activities that require to be done in pursuance of due diligence. Due care is the diligent application of the security program to protect your assets. This is important. The lack of due care is considered negligence and could invite legal regulatory consequences. So, what does this mean, guys? It means we have a policy, we have a program. When there is a breach, your regulator comes and looks at it, or there's a court case, the court looks at it. What do they find? They say, our own policy we have not followed. Then they will throw the book at you. They'll say, you're being very careless. Your own policy says that. Why have you not followed it? Then they may fine you very strictly. Consider this. Let's say your organization sends you for training. Okay, sometimes many organizations send people for training. The learning team in your organization will keep a record. This program has sent so many people, multiple cohorts, multiple batches. This record is important. Why is this record important? Let us say there is a breach and there is an investigation or a court case. There are two scenarios. One is we can tell the regulator or the court, see, we have taken every possible care. We have trained people. Here's a record that we have trained people. Despite the best care, sometimes things can go wrong. Another scenario is we have no record. We haven't done anything. Where do you think the regulator or the court will be more strict with us, will be more harsh with us? The first case or the second case?
Second case.
The second case, right? This is why the lack of due care is considered negligence and can invite consequences. And this is why in all organizations, suppose some of you here you come for this program on your own. There could be some programs for which your organization has sponsored you and sent you. In that case, the learning team will keep a record of all that. Give me a moment, guys, to drink water. Yeah. What are the examples of due care? Monitoring and protecting our network, training our people, conducting security awareness programs for our employees, following the security policy at work. We have a policy, we should follow that. Our policy says backup data. Are we carrying out backups? We have firewalls. Are we looking at the logs? If there are alerts, are we acting on it? When there is an incident, are we acting according to policy? Are we addressing the root cause? Are we learning from the process? And whenever there are any security issues, are we identifying the root cause and taking remedial action, right? Now go back and let's look at I should have put this on the previous slide. So due diligence is like checking for termites before you buy a house. That's not enough. Due care is periodically we have to check the roof, have termites come again, then fix it if necessary. Right, guys? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Yes, Hari. Yes, Hari. Yeah.
Is this part of complaint?
Sorry?
Oh.
Sorry, Hari?
I
Hari, are
agree.
you talking to me or someone else? Okay, I think Hari is talking to someone else. I'll mute him. Okay. Now, take a look at this recap question. Try to answer it. Write your answer in the chat box. Excellent, guys. Everybody got it right. I'm so happy. Okay, the next topic is understanding legal, regulatory, and compliance issues relating to information security. Here we talk about cyber crimes, licensing, import-export controls, trans-border data flow, privacy, GDPR, contractual legal industry standards, and regulatory requirements. Okay, so what is a computer crime? A computer crime is any crime which involves the use of computers. The computer is either used as a victim, a weapon. It may be a victim or it is incidental. I'll explain all this in a moment. What are examples of this? identity theft, hacking, phishing, spamming, all these are examples. This is the definition of computer crime by the US Department of Justice. Any violations of criminal law that involve a knowledge of computer technology for their perpetration, investigation, or prosecution. Today, computers and the internet has grown. We all have devices. The result is there is a lot of opportunity for cybercrime, which we are witnessing every day. Correct, guys?
Yes.
True.
Computer crimes fall under three categories. The first is computer assisted crime, which means the computer is used as a weapon or a tool to commit a crime. For example, people may attack financial systems, industrial espionage, where they try to steal information of others, hacktivism. What is hacktivism, guys? What is
Hacking which is done for on the basis of activism, like there are people who,
exactly? They
yeah.
have some strong views, then they carry out hacking. These are not criminals. They are doing it because they have some strong views. It may be political, etc. Correct? Right, guys? Is that correct?
Yes.
It could also be state actors. See, remember one thing today, cyber warfare is the next level of warfare, right? Consider this. Remember, in the sense today, you don't have, you can bring down somebody's infrastructure without firing a single shot. That is the cyber warfare, right? You may be able to disable their power generation, right? So, cyber warfare is the next level of warfare. The next aspect is the computer is the victim, the computer is the target of the crime, right? Like somebody is launching a distributed denial of service on you, installing malware, they're trying to capture passwords. There's a third category where the computer is incidental to the crime, which means the computer is neither. Praveen, please mute yourself. Guys, for the next meeting, I'm going to mute everybody. Only if you want to raise a hand, you can talk, right? Because there's a disturbance. Everybody hears a rumbling sound. And I can't keep telling people, can't go keep going and muting people. We are losing a lot of time. Okay. Now, here what happens. The crime lies in the act itself. The fact that it's on a computer is incidental. Let's say somebody is storing some stolen information. Suppose somebody is engaging in child pornography. The fact that they're doing it is a crime. Even if it's not on a computer, it is still a crime. So here, the computer is incidental to the crime. When there's a crime, there may be some provisions of cyber law under which it can be prosecuted. But it doesn't, suppose there's no provision for that particular thing, sometimes people can fall back on criminal laws, right? Because criminal laws usually have a broad terms which can include everything. For example, before we had our IT Act in India, before that, we had what is called the Indian Telegraph Act, which deals with, which goes back to 1880 or something. But there's one clause in that which says anything where signals are sent over the wire or over the ether, over the wireless network, over radio networks. Using provisions of that, they were prosecuting until we got a separate IT Act. Right, guys? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now this is the categories. Let's look at some of the types of crimes, the classification. As I said, cyber warfare is the next level of warfare. So the military and intelligence attacks, these are often carried out by state actors, or they are highly skilled because of the government behind them. They are also APTs, advanced persistent threats. Advanced persistent threats, we'll talk about it in more detail later. These are carried out by highly skilled attackers. It's a comprehensive attack. They're highly skilled. Sometimes these APTs are a front for a government. Let's say government X, right? Country wants to attack the systems of another country. Why? They are not going to do it directly because it should not be traced back to them. They have an APT. This is a kind of criminal gang which is working on their behalf. So they'll say, okay, you guys go and launch this attack so that this gives them plausible deniability. They can always say, I don't know anything about it. Some criminal gang did it, right? Is that right, guys?
Yes.
There are also business attacks, corporate espionage. Organizations try to take business and trade secrets from each other. Intellectual property, secret formulae, right? Let's say your organization has some intellectual property. Your competitor may want to get their hands on it. State sponsored espionage is pretty significant. See, we have often read in the press that Americans have said Chinese companies are targeting us. They are trying to get our trade secrets. We don't know how much truth there is in it, but this is an allegation that often comes out. It may be there, not just China and the US, all countries probably do this to each other. Yes, Anim.
A couple of years, not couple of years, at least 10 to 15 years back, when Cisco was sold in China, they copied all the code of them and made
Yeah,
UI
yeah,
out of it. So will it come
possibly.
under intellectual property?
I guess it would.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Rahul, you raised a hand.
Hey, hi Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel, my question is respect to the building of viruses by some of the big firms of antivirus manufacturers and then
Mm-hmm.
selling the patches for those viruses,
Mm-hmm.
where it actually falls out of these all types.
You mean creating viruses, is it?
Yeah, and then again providing solution for those
No,
viruses.
providing solution, I'm not sure that's an attack. If you're creating viruses, it depends on the purpose. Governments may implement malware. Then that would come under military and intelligence. It depends on the purpose for which it is done. The same tool can be used in multiple cases. Okay? Depends on who is doing it and why. Okay, next is financial attacks, where the objective is to steal credit card numbers, etc. And attackers carry out an attack at the behest of clients. See, there is something called now cybercrime for hire. These are like APTs and all. These are skilled gangs. They are not necessarily doing it themselves. It's like they have a service. You want some, you know what they do when they steal your credit card numbers. What do? They go sell it on the dark net, right? This can also be terrorist attacks. For example, they may be targeting your SCADA systems, right? The objective is to disrupt normal life and to instill fear. Industrial control systems. Yesterday we talked about Stuxnet, correct? Where they targeted the nuclear enrichment plant of a country, right? So these are also terrorist attacks. These may also be government sponsored. They may be doing it. Governments may be sponsoring it. There are also what are called grudge attacks. For example, let's say one of your disgruntled employees, he feels the organization hasn't treated them well. They may do something to harm you. Incidentally, insider threat is one of the most insidious threats. Our own people, either they are, they are rogue or they are not happy with the way they have been treated. Insider threat is most malicious, most harmful because they have access to your systems. They know the weaknesses that are there in your controls. Trill attacks, these are called script kiddies. They don't have a high level of technical skills. They use some scripts which are available and they're doing it just for kicks. Website defacement, etc. We talked about hacktivists, hackers and activists. These have political motivations. The idea is to disrupt the working of an organization or a government that they disagree with, and often organized into loose groups. Yes, Harshita. Go ahead, Harshita.
Yeah. Hi, Daniel. So,
Yeah.
Daniel, in grudge attack, you have given the example of insider threat.
Mm-mm.
I think that the insider threat is not a right example because insider threat not always happen because of the grudge. Sometimes
That's
it
true. No,
happens because
that's true.
of greed as
That's
well.
true. No, you're right in saying every insider threat is not a grudge attack, but sometimes it may be purely because they want to take advantage and make as much money as they want. This is one example. It doesn't mean it's the only example. Okay.
Um,
Okay. Now come to advanced persistent threat. Now, APTs, they are different because they're continuous, they're clandestine, and highly sophisticated. Whereas other attacks may be hit and run. The guy wants to get as much as he can and leave. These remain inside for a prolonged period of time because they will study your entire system, do as much harm to you, get as much information as they can. These are carried out by experts. It's not something they do without preparation. Targets are very carefully chosen. They're very carefully researched. Usually, these are large organizations or government networks. This may be because they want to steal your IP. They want to get some sensitive information. They probably want to sabotage critical infrastructure of your organization, like ICS systems, industrial control systems. They want to get your personal information, your access credentials, etc. They're called advanced because these are highly skilled, persistent because, as I said, this is not hit and run. They are in no hurry. They will lie low, wait for an opportune moment. That's why they're also called low and slow attacks. He's low profiles and be there for some time. These are carried out by cyber criminal gangs who pool knowledge. They get together and they're also used by state actors. State actors use APTs and criminal gangs as a front. How do they differ? They're very complex. They're not hit and run attacks. Once the guy infiltrates, he's going to stay inside, study the whole thing. Another thing is, once they infiltrate, they will try to get access to everything in the network. It's not as though he's just trying to grab whatever he can and get out. They give some names and numbers for these APTs. You don't need these numbers. I just gave it to you for information. If it's something which originates from China, they call it panda. If it's Russian, they call it bear, like cozy bear, wicked panda, etc. The Stuxnet is believed to be by the US and Israel, which is why it's not given an APT number because the classification comes from the US. And as you know, all governments may do it, but no government will say that we are doing it. Correct? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
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 Okay, now the thing is,
Derek,
this is
sorry,
not,
Derek,
yeah, sorry,
actually
yeah.
nowadays they are combine that each and together. See, the APPs has a separate, they own the APPs actually. The all the APT attacks button have been
Yeah, your voice is not clear, Lakshmi Narayan. Can you speak a
sorry.
little slowly? Yeah, tell me.
The APT groups well known that MITRE attack framework. So all the security protectors use that MITRE attack framework. That's
That's
why.
correct. But if you recall what I told you yesterday,
Hmm.
security is a cat and mouse game. You find one thing, the guy is not sitting on his hands. He'll find something else. Okay? You don't need to remember the names of the attacks. I'm just telling you what an APT is. Right?
Oh, oh.
Okay. Now, coming back to this, remember, although this is an international certification, there is some orientation towards American laws and European laws. You should have, you don't need to have the knowledge of a lawyer. But remember, security ultimately operates in the framework of a law, of legal framework. This is why you should have a broad understanding or knowledge of the legal framework within which we operate. And again, we talk about US laws and then the GDPR, but it doesn't talk about the laws of other countries except in passing. In passing, there is a mention of this. You know, like when I did a program for Target, so one of those guys appeared for the exam and he passed, very smart fellow. But one thing was there, he told me later, one question was, what is the ideal temperature for a data center? The ideal temperature in the range of 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, the equivalent in Fahrenheit. Now, the problem is in an international certification exam, you'd expect that they give the temperature in both. Now, they gave the options in Fahrenheit. They didn't give the centigrade at all, right? But this guy remembered the formula he had learned in school to convert from centigrade to Fahrenheit. Then he was able to answer. So that's why I told you, although it's an international certification, this is the way it is. There is some orientation towards US laws and European laws. So the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is the oldest cybercrime in the US. This applies to what are called protected computers. Protected computers, and the definition of this law, are US government or those used by financial institutions for interstate or foreign commerce or communication. That means it doesn't apply to all. It is US government or financial institution. There are different categories of offenses. I just given you for information. You don't need to remember all this. Obtaining national security information. You shouldn't, if anybody is trying to get state security information without authorization, that's a crime. Accessing a computer without obtaining information is a crime. If I try to access your computer without your permission, that's an offense. Trespassing, breaking into a government computer, accessing something with an intention to defraud, damaging somebody's computer or damaging their information, trafficking in passwords, stealing passwords and selling them, or threatening to damage a computer. Remember, take a look at this. This exam will not test your knowledge of these laws, right? They are given there so that we have an understanding of the legal framework within which cybersecurity operates. Okay, guys? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so let's look at some other US acts. US Economic Espionage Act. What does it say? What is economic espionage? The unlawful targeting and theft of critical economic intelligence, such as trade secrets and intellectual property. Remember what we said? There are allegations that the trade secrets are being stolen by others, so that's why they came up with a law. Give me a moment to drink water, guys. Now, how did this arise? As I said, there were several instances of employees of US companies sharing technology with foreign governments that threatened their national security. To counter that, they came up with a law. So it criminalizes all that. Penalties can be high, imprisonment. You don't have to remember all this. Just remember this came because to check the stealing of their national secrets or their technology by foreign companies. Child Pornography Act. So obviously, in any country, child pornography is considered very bad. So it prescribes severe product punishment for the production and distribution of child pornography. There are some other acts like the U.S. Homeland Security Act. Now, this yes, ST, you raised a hand. Yeah,
Yes, just confirming, Daniel,
yeah,
about the previous one, the Child Pornography Act.
yeah,
You have mentioned production and distribution, but
yeah.
is it not also covering holding child pornography on one's computer?
I really
Does
don't know, and it's not very relevant to us because this is a US law. Just remember that dealing in child pornography in any way is an offense, right? Whether production, distribution, remember, we are not going into it at the level of a lawyer, nor is it something we are going to be concerned about in the exam. Just remember, it is to curb child pornography. Okay?
fair enough? Okay.
Remember, we are not lawyers. Remember what that. Okay. Now, come to the Homeland Security Act. This came in 2002. Now, what happened around this time? What happened around this time? 9/11 attacks. Okay, I'm just going to give you a little background about this. What happened in the 9/11 attacks? They found that some agencies had some information which was not shared. I'm not sure if you guys followed it at that time. Maybe you're still in college or something like that. What they found is one question that came up was how could so many people come to the US? How could they take flying lessons, plan to fly their planes into these buildings, and no government agency, police, or FBI knew anything about this? Later, they found there were some bits of information here and there, but this information wasn't shared. So that's why they reorganized, right? Various government agencies were responsible for counter espionage. They consolidated all this in one place, the Department of Homeland Security. So all the relevant information is in one place, right? That is the logic behind this. The core missions are these: preventing terrorism, securing your borders, enforcing immigration law, safeguarding cyber systems, and ensuring resilience if a disaster occurs. Along with this, they created another act called the Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act. They created a body called the National Counter-Terrorism Center, and they created a position of Director of National Intelligence so that all the relevant information would be in one place. This law requires that all government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, should share intelligence information with the others, right? When they were doing this, there was a concern, are we trampling on the liberties of our citizens, right? See, between privacy and counter-terrorism, there is a very fine balance. The protection we give to our citizens to protect their privacy can sometimes be used by terrorists. Some time back, I was listening to a talk by a senior Indian police service officer in Bangalore in cybersecurity. I remember his saying that WhatsApp, it encrypts all conversations, and this is being used by terrorists also. So some balance is required. So this is why in this process they established an oversight, privacy and oversight board to make sure that the privacy and civil liberties of US citizens are protected. Okay, guys, this is what you need to understand. Why did the Homeland Security Act come? Because it is all consolidated in one place. The next is what's called CAN spam, Controlling the Assault of Non-Solicited Pornography and Marketing Act. Now, this is all non-solicited pornography, all that. But the important thing is this. Do you remember, even in our country or many countries now, if a message is an ad, if a SMS is an ad, it comes with a different prefix. So this comes from that. Once a legislation comes, other countries may also have similar legislation. You should be able to identify the message as an ad. We should be able to opt out. For example, we get many emails. There has to be a subscribe unsubscribe button. We say we don't want it, they have to unsubscribe us. When we say we want to opt out, it should be processed promptly. It's not as though they can take their own sweet time. They shouldn't use any deceptive subject lines which can be misleading. You think it comes from something important. Another thing they said is sometimes, remember what we said, if you are engaging a third party, ultimate responsibility is yours. So suppose the company has engaged a third party to send messages. If there are any violations, the company and the third party sending the messages are both liable. Right? Remember, high level you need, that's all, guys. This is not a law exam. I bet when you guys all signed up, you didn't think you would read so much about laws, right? Did you?
Yes, yes, we do.
A broad understanding, that's all that's required. Okay. Some other countries, the UK has a law called the Computer Misuse Act. 5 offenses related to cybercrime, which are similar. All countries will have something similar. Unauthorized access to computer material, unauthorized access to with the intention to commit an offense, unauthorized acts with an intent to impair the operation of a computer, causing damage, etc. India's act gives legal recognition of electronic documents, digital signatures. It defines penalties for cyber crimes, data theft, identity theft, child pornography, etc. Cybercrime Act of Australia, it defines serious computer crimes and establish penalties. Okay, now we must understand how cybercrime has evolved, right? Hackers move in lockstep with security. Today, we think we have fixed, they are adopting a certain methodology. Your cyber police have stopped it. Don't think those guys are sitting on their hands. They are looking for some workaround. At one time, hackers were bored teenagers. It was like thrill attacks. They're doing it just for fun. Now they are well organized criminal enterprises, APTs. Many attacks are not fully reported because even an organization that has been attacked does not want to wash their dirty linen in public. After there is a breach, have you seen the statements given by any organization? No serious loss of data, no sensitive data has been lost, and we are taking appropriate measures, blah, 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 right? The disclosures are always the bare minimum. Leapfrogging. An attacker will always establish a beachhead at the weakest point. So, in your, let's say, in your data center, there are multiple systems. All are not equally critical. Let's say there's one system which is not very critical. This may not have a high level of protection. The guy will come in where this is easiest. From there, he will leapfrog to something which is more critical. This is called the leapfrog attack. Pivot to a more price target. Yes, Arvind.
Yeah. So prior to this slide, we discussed about the India, right, 2020 Information
Yeah.
Security Act, right? We are not considering for this DPDP, which is Digital Personal Data Protection
No, no. The law, the
2020.
act. This doesn't talk about it. We are going with the CBK. Remember what I told you. We
Okay.
don't go very deep into each country's laws, right? This is an international certification. If you're doing
Okay.
a course in DPDP, then you will go deep into it, right?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Supply chain attacks. Do you recall that we said many attacks have taken place with third party service providers because it's easier for them to breach their security? It's easier for attackers to breach third and fourth parties and then gain access to a large organization. Remember, we had an example yesterday. You're a large organization, you have robust defenses. I'm an attacker, it's not easy for me to breach. But you are taking a service of somebody. It may be easier for me to breach. Naturally, you have given some access to this guy. I can use that to. Do you recall on the first yesterday, we talked about the target attack? One point, they lost 40 million customer card details. This happened through a third party. They managed to breach the security of a third party, gain access to the admin credentials. From there, they went into target system. APTs we talked about, insider threats we talked about. You also have now ransomware as a service. So they are lending out their services, hacking as a service, right? State actors, right? They operate through criminal proxies. They don't do it directly because it gives them plausible deniability. And what do these countries do? They will tell the criminal gangs, you operate freely in my country, just don't attack us. You go attack other countries. New attacks are things like AI, deep fakes, which are coming in. This is how cybercrime has evolved over the ages, right? Do you think this is quite informative, guys? Yes, Lakshmi Narayan.
Yes, Tom.
Would you possibly give us some example for that state attacker and APT? What's the difference between both?
I told you
Major.
yesterday, na Stuxnet and all that. I told you yesterday about Stuxnet. Yeah. Any other question? Okay.
One question.
Mm-hmm.
These categories of threat that we talked about, for example, APTs versus hacktivists,
Mm-hmm.
does the definition allow for something like an overlap between these categories?
They could be,
For
they
a
could
group
be.
like, let's say, there could be. Okay.
They could be. See, this is with a view to your understanding the different types of crimes, right? Don't look at it like a law graduate, like which is, does it fall into this, does it fall into that? You're not going to be asked questions like that. Remember what I told you. You are not expected to have that level of expertise for this exam. Okay, we talked about island hopping, right? We said for an attacker, it's easier to gain access to a third party supplier and from there go to a major corporate, right? So many breaches have been traced back to service providers. Okay, now international cooperation. What happens is today cyber criminals don't care about national borders. This guy will be in one country and he will be attacking somebody in another country. How do you standardize international response? Some attempts have been made. One is the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime, usually called the Budapest Convention because it was signed in the city of Budapest. Then OECD, right? The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which was the earliest, 1980. And GDPR, the germ of GDPR, you will find in OECD, right? We'll talk about all this in a moment. The Convention of Cyber on Cybercrime, called the Budapest Convention, goes back to 2001. It's a criminal justice treaty whose objective is to create a standard international response to cybercrime. You know what the problem is? Let's say you are in country X, right? Somebody in country Y is attacking you. You go and tell this guy, look, we are facing an attack from your country. That guy may say, okay, I'm not aware of it. Or he may say, that's not an offense in my country. Why should I be bothered? It may be a offense in your country. In my country, it's not an offense. This is why they said we should have a standardized international response. We all agree that certain types of acts are wrong and we will help each other to find it, right? Makes sense, guys?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So it's made up of 68 countries. There are also international organizations. For example, Interpol is a member of this. What are the primary objectives? Harmonizing national laws related to cyber related crime. Harmonize. Criminalization of conduct such as illegal access, data systems interference, computer related fraud, child pornography. So if these we all agree, it doesn't matter where that guy is. Any of the signatory countries, you can say, look, this is under the treaty, this is an offense, please help me. We have to support in the investigation of these crimes and international cooperation in the fight against cybercrime. Give me a moment, guys, to drink water. Okay. Now, this had a limitation. In 2001, there wasn't much of cloud computing. In fact, it was not there at all. So it is based on the notion that national interest and location of the data are the same, which means your data will be in your country and whatever is your national interest, your laws will apply there. Is that the case now? It's not. You're putting your data with some service provider like say Amazon or Google, they are replicating the data across multiple countries, right? So, to make it more up to date with the current situation, an additional protocol to the conventional cybercrime was created, seeking it to align with the current scenario of cloud technology. And this was approved in May 2022. And it is going through the signing. The process of all countries ratifying it by the legislatures and acts is pretty long drawn. As of today, I think several countries have signed and it is being ratified by the legislatures. Okay, now come to licensing requirements, right? So I like this cartoon. So intellectual property laws, why are they created? Because inventors are using their intellectual capabilities to create something which will benefit humanity and they should benefit from that work, right? Otherwise, what happens? Somebody creates something and someone else is duplicating it. If they're using that, then the creator, inventor should be reasonably compensated. These are the different categories of intellectual property: licensing, patent, trademark, copyright, and trade secret. First is licensing, right? Now, believe me, there are some places or some parts of the world where uh, using pirated products is very, very common. In fact, according to some estimates, there's an organization called Business Software Alliance. They say the value of counterfeited and pirated products is more than $2 trillion, and about 40% of the software used worldwide is not licensed, right? Now, what happens is it is not only the creator of the product. Let's say we are using a pirated Windows machine. It's not only Microsoft that is losing money, we are also at risk because without patches, without updates, we don't have protection. Enforcing licensing is a challenge in jurisdictions where they don't take it seriously. The enforcement of licensing laws may be lax in some countries. However, emerging technology gives a solution. For example, have you seen now cloud enabled models? There is Office 365. So what did they say? Why do you want to use pirated software? You pay a license for it. We will give it to you on the cloud. We will give you some room on the cloud, etc. So many people may say, okay, this is safer. Maybe I have to pay a little subscription, but this is safer. Correct? Agreed, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Yes, Lakshmi Narayan.
Sorry,
Yeah.
wrongly raised. Sorry.
Okay. So IP laws are created to protect intellectual property from being copied and used by others. There are two categories. Industrial property. Industrial property is things like inventions, trademarks, patents, designs, etc. Copyright is literary and artistic works, plays, poems, novels. By extension, computer programs are also applied here. An important principle is internal protection of intellectual property. So, what do you think this means, guys? What do we mean when we say internal protection of intellectual property? Yes, guys, tell me.
A lot of organizations have their own policies to protect their intellectual property. We use DLP for the same purpose.
We
And
classify data, correct? Yeah.
PII, SPII.
Yeah, so that's correct. You're right. So what this says is, suppose we don't have any internal protection. As he said, we are not using any technical solutions. We haven't classified our data. We haven't trained our staff. Remember what we said, due care, lack of due care is negligence. In this situation, if there is a breach, our intellectual property is stolen, if we go to a court, do you think a court will be sympathetic?
No.
No, because they'll say the most you this is negligence. You haven't classified your data, you haven't trained your people. This is why we have to have internal protection. To avail itself of legal protection, an organization is expected to identify and protect its sensitive data. If you fail to do that, it's considered the lack of due care and you could lose your legal protection. What are examples of internal protection? Classified data. Give it the appropriate level of protection. If it is, let's say, top level of classification, it only the highest level can access it. I'm going to restrict access. I'll encrypt the data, all that. Access controls, levels of access, logging, auditing, protected storage, I'll encrypt it. Employees should be made aware. We will train people. This is very sensitive information, right? If we don't do this, then we are failing in our duties. Correct, guys? Okay, now come to patent laws. So a patent gives the creator of some intellectual property exclusive rights. Generally, it's 20 years. Remember, there can be some variation across countries, but generally it's 20 years, which means when you create anything, if you have patented it, only you can use it. If anyone else wants to use it, they have to pay you a licensing fee. This applies to inventions, drugs. It also applies to software programs. These are valid only in the country in which it's issued, subject to some exceptions, which I'll come to later. You have to file patents wherever you want protection. Some basic requirements are there. It should be something new or original. You can't rehash something which is existing and say I'm patenting it. It must be useful. If it doesn't have any utility, why should you patent it? It should not be something which is very obvious. Remember, from the exam point of view, a patent is considered the strongest form of intellectual property because for 20 years it gives you exclusive protection. So, if you get a question saying which is the strongest form of IP, remember the answer is patent laws. There are some concerns about the way patents are being issued. There are concerns that they're overly broad, right? Consider this. Patents, why are they given? They are given to so that people use their ability to research to benefit society as a whole, right? Sometimes these vendors end up suing each other. Some years ago, do you recall? Apple sued Samsung. Samsung sued Apple back, right? Each saying you violated my intellectual property. So there is a view that the patents are very broad. There are also the emergence of non-practicing entities or patent trolls. Who are these patent trolls? These are people who are abusing the process. Why do we give a patent? So that they use the intellectual capabilities to produce something which will benefit mankind, benefit society. What do some guys do? They have no intention of manufacturing it. They'll create something, patent it, and sit back. If anybody tries to use it, then they'll sue them and say, you have to give me license fee. Then the basic question that comes up is, why should you give them protection when they're not using it for the benefit of humanity? Right? Valid criticism? Is that valid?
Yes.
Yes.
These patent cases are pretty large. Here are some cases. Centripetal Networks won an award of $1.9 billion against Cisco for copying their threat detection technology. Remember, big companies are doing this. Apple and Broadcom were ordered to pay Caltech $1.1 million because they took their wireless error detection codes. I give you this example to make you understand that big companies are engaging in these violations. Remember what I told you, that traditionally you have to file your patents in multiple countries. But there is an attempt to simplify the process. This is called Patent Cooperation Treaty, PCT. It is administered by WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, which is an agency of the United Nations. What does it do? It's trying to simplify the process. What it says is there are 150, 157 or 158 member states. It says if you file a patent in any one of these countries, then it'll be, I mean, it'll, there are some process. Instead of filing in 150 different countries, you can file in one of the member countries. What are the limitations? We'll talk about in a moment. This is a unified procedure. You don't have to file everything internationally. You file one international application. Simplified, streamlined process. What are the advantages? You file in one place, one office, etc. These 158 countries are the major economies of the world. This reduces duplication, but there are limitations. It doesn't mean you can file simply in one place and forget it. There is actually, this is only an international application. There is no international patent. It will be registered here, but final approval or refusal is taken by the national office. Each country's patent office, this will be sent to them. They will examine, they will take a decision whether to allow or not. In this connection, you may have to pay some local fees also. Each country may ask for some search fees, examination fees. These patent laws, legal requirements, there can be some variation from country to country. So if some country has some other requirements, you have to fulfill that. It simplifies it, but it is not a single international patent. Right, guys? Is it clear?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Copyright protects authors of original works, right, from unauthorized duplication. This covers literary works, musical works, dramatic, pantomime, choreography, pictorial, graphical, motion pictures, blah, blah, blah. By extension, computer software is also covered under literary works. There is a critical part. Remember this. It protects only the expression inherent in the software. Expression inherent in the software. It doesn't protect the idea or process behind the software, right? What does this mean? It means it's only protecting the source code. Let me give you an example. How many of you have used OpenOffice or Libre?
Um,
We have used it, correct?
yes.
Is it very much like MS Office?
True.
But is he violating their copyright? Otherwise, would
No.
MS Office have left him?
No,
It
it
is
is not.
because he is writing his own code, right? He is not taking the code of Microsoft. He is writing his own code. This is why it says the idea or the process behind the software is not protected. Microsoft can't say word processing is my job, my copyright. You can't do anything with word processing or as a spreadsheet. Only the expression inherent in the software which is interpreted in the source code. The idea or the process is not patented, is not copyrighted. Okay, guys? Clear? Yes, Anim.
Okay.
Nowadays, Windows which are coming, they're using their command line on the basis of what we used to use Bash in the Linux. So
Mm-hmm.
where would it fall? Will it fall in the how? Is it the similar what the last point which you mentioned? The protects only the expression, not the source code. will it be
No, I'm
falling
not
under?
sure. No, I'm not sure how that is relevant. How Microsoft is implementing it is not relevant, and I'm not aware of it. What it means
Okay,
is you can't say that nobody else can create a spreadsheet. So long it
okay,
protects only the copyright, only the source code. Remember that. You can
okay,
make a similar product. You can write your own source code to have a word processor. Nobody can say you are taking mine unless you take his source code. Okay.
okay. Thank you.
The thing is, I don't know, as far as I can make out, they probably make, from what you tell me, they are making it accessible through the CLI as well as GUI. Is that correct? You can go to the command line interface or a GUI. Is it something like that?
No, no. What I meant to say was that earlier the CLI which Windows used to had, that was very narrow-minded in one
Okay, now they
context
are more compatible. You can have
with the
something
Linux
like a
sort of
Liba.
commands.
Okay, okay,
Yes,
fair
now we
enough.
can use
Okay,
Linux-based commands in
commands
the
here.
Windows
Okay, I don't
interface.
think that is relevant to this. Yes, Lakshmi
Okay.
Narayan, you raised your hand.
So the idea and process of begins is not come under the pattern.
Yeah, what's
I
your
was,
question?
my question is whether this idea and process of begins is not come to under the pattern. The pattern is that
Copyright. Yeah, it doesn't come under that. That's what I
no, no,
said, right?
no. This is not coming in copyright, which is coding and other things. So
Uh,
I am asking that why it is not coming under the pattern.
we will discuss the difference between patent and copyright later. There's another slide. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now you don't necessarily have to register. It occurs automatically. It's not a prerequisite. Suppose if you look at your employment contracts, there will be one clause there saying that if during the course of your work you create anything, the copyright accrues to the organization, not to you. Period of protection, typically it may be up to 70 years from the death of the last surviving authors. If it's anonymous, it will be 95 years from the date of first publication, etc. Remember, these can vary from country to country, right? Okay, with modern computing technology, it is much easier to violate copyright. There used to be sites called BitTorrent. I'm not sure if any of you have used it, where you could play. People were sharing music with each other without paying for it. These were called where sites, right? So this is a violation of copyright law. This is why they came up with a new act called the Digital Millennium Copyrights Act, which now that's why BitTorrent is not there anymore. They prescribed very serious penalties, imprisonment, etc. But usually they exempt non-profits, schools, and libraries because they are using it to educate people. Under this also, let's say you're buying a branded software with a copyright, you can keep a backup for testing or usage in case that gets damaged. There's something called a takedown notice. Under this law, suppose under this law, they find that somebody is hosting a link which violates copyright, they will give them a takedown notice. Say you are posting this, which is a violation, go and remove this immediately. So if you remove it, usually there is no penalty, but if you don't remove it, then there could be penalties. Okay. Now coming to Lakshmi Narayan's question, how do we distinguish between copyright and patent? Remember what we said, copyright protects the expression of ideas, not the ideas themselves, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Patents protect inventions such as new processes, machines, or chemicals. In other words, patents protect ideas, not just the expressions of them. Best way to understand this difference is consider a cookbook which is protected by copyright. What does this mean? You and I can't take a recipe from this book and pass it off as our own because the author has the copyright. But the recipe is given in that we can cook every day if we want at home. There is no problem. Suppose instead that recipe were protected by a patent, then the user would have to go back and ask the owner of the patent every time before you cook anything, right? That is the difference between a copyright and a patent. Coming back to your question, Lakshmi Narayan, Why is it not protected against the patent? If the guy has filed a patent for it and if it has been accepted, yes, he can go and ask for it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, now come to trademark. A trademark is a name, word, symbol which we associate with a particular product, like Coca-Cola, or let's say you look at any footwear with the stick mark on it. What will you associate it with? What will you associate it with?
Nike.
Nike. So what happens is Nike has spent a lot of effort to make quality footwear, as a result of which we associate it with this. Now, suppose you and I make some footwear and we put this mark on it. What happens? Two things happen. We are piggybacking on the goodwill that Nike has created. We are misleading consumers. They may think it's a Nike shoe. We are misleading them. So, trademark is designed to protect the goodwill of an organization, which it has created by investing in its product, service, or image, right? At the same time, we should not be misleading people. Trademarks cannot be a common word. That's why Intel's chips, they call it Pentium. You can't trademark something called chip. Apple's iPhone, you can't patent something called a phone. Trademarks are registered with the government registrar, various different countries. It is not compulsory. You don't have to have it. Trademarks should be distinctive, should not deceive or mislead. They should not violate public order or morality. Next is trade secret. Trade secret is something on which your whole business depends, right? If this is compromised, your business model may collapse, or at least there will be significant damage. For example, it is said that the formula for Pepsi Cola or Coca Cola is known only at any point of time to a handful of people. If this formula were disclosed, everybody would start making the same kind of thing and they would lose their uh, trade secret. So trade secrets are protected without registration, because if you register, you're giving the formula to everyone. Trade secrets have perpetual protection until it's discovered, legally acquired, or disclosed. Maybe one day Pepsi Cola says, okay, our trade secret we're putting in the public domain. Then anybody can use it. Otherwise, it is protected. But to be eligible for protection, what should they do? It should be secret. The company should have taken reasonable steps to protect the secrecy, such as physical and electronic restrictions, monitoring, training for staff. You should have a policy to protect your trade secrets. Make sure your people know about it. Obviously, if they don't do this, it's a lack of due care. And whatever trademark they have, it should have actual or potential commercial value. Right? Right, guys? Yes, try answering this question. Which of the following is not an attack on intellectual property? Okay, I think some of these terms are not clear. Let us discuss the terms. We may not discuss some of these. Let me explain. Right? So piracy, we all know, right? Stealing somebody's software. What is enticement? Okay. There are two terms called enticement and entrapment, right? Entrapment. We will study this more when we come to incident management, domain 7. What is enticement? Enticement means the guy had a intention to commit a crime, right? And you're making it more attractive for him, right? One moment. Yeah. Entrapment means the guy had no intention of committing a crime, right? For example, let's say we have a honeypot. So what's a honeypot, guys?
We are
What's a honeypot?
luring someone to
Subcontracting.
we are putting up a server, making it look like something very important, but actually there's nothing important there. Correct?
End of
That's a
process.
honeypot. Correct? It is meant to distract. Now, honeypot is enticement because the guy had an intention to attack you. That's why he's penetrated your network. You're making it more attractive for him. What is entrapment? Suppose we give a link on our website saying this is available here. If you want, you can download it. The guy clicks on it and downloads it. Then we say you have downloaded my intellectual property and we try to sue him, right? Enticement is legal. It is acceptable because the guy had an intention to commit a crime. This is okay. But entrapment, the guy had no intention to commit a crime. You put a link on your website. After that, you're saying you did wrong. So, enticement is acceptable under law. Evidence can be accepted. Entrapment, it is not acceptable. Right? Clear, guys? What is cyber squatting? Have you come across cases where guys will go and register a URL in the name of something like a prominent actor or an actress, and then they'll put some nasty stuff there, then they'll try to get money from them. You want this. This is called cyber squatting, right? What is typo squatting? The guy has a name very similar, right? For example, he is registering something with the name of a bank, let's say BAANK, right? He's making people will think this is yours, right? So this is now cyber squatting and typo squatting are a form of intellectual property because this guy is trying to mislead people. Enticement is not an attack because the guy had an intention of coming into your network and you have just made it more attractive for him. Okay, guys? Hello, the class is silent. What's up?
No, it's
Okay.
clear.
Yep, makes sense. Clear now.
Yes.
Okay, now come to import export controls. Many countries have regulations which prevent the movement of typically dual use technologies. So, what are dual use technologies, guys? Drones can be used for peaceful purposes, they can also be used for warfare, correct? These are called dual use technologies. Let's say your country has created some very powerful computers or a new chip. You may not want that to go into the hands of your competitor or an enemy, right? Computing encryption technologies. So many countries have laws against this. One of the most important is what's called the Wassenaar Agreement. I think Wassenaar is a country in Germany or Australia where this was signed. It's called Conventional Arms and Dual Use Goods and Technologies. It's made up of 42 countries, and this prohibits the export of high performance computer systems, encryption software, and dual use technologies. These countries can vary. I think currently it's Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. Depending on political equations, this can change. There are also, I mean, when we are talking about US laws now, ITAR. Suppose, let's say, as you know, in the US, a lot of military equipment is manufactured by the private sector. Let's say they want to export some military items to a country. They have to get approval from the US government under this regulation. Only then can they do this. EU also has a similar law. And there's an export administration regulation which covers many items which are primarily designed for commercial use but also can be used for military use, right? Dual use. The provisions of these laws can be very, very strict because the idea is to prevent military equipment or potentially very destructive kind of technology falling into the wrong hands. Right, guys? Clear? Well, how come everybody is silent? Okay, now we come to data localization. Actually, data localization, data sovereignty are not very well defined. So, actually, this is from an article I wrote in LinkedIn. I just put a couple of slides so that we understand this. How did this idea of data localization come about? Do you recall that Edward Snowden was a defense contractor in the US? He revealed that the National Security Agency of the US was collecting vast amounts of data, not only about their citizens, but also of citizens of other countries. one thing to remember is privacy standards are more rigid in Europe than in the US. So many countries were concerned that the data about their citizens, which may be stored on the servers of US tech companies, would end up in the hands of the national security agencies. Then many countries reason that suppose we keep this data in servers in our countries, then it can't be accessed by the US government. This is how data localization came. But then they realized one thing. You're localizing the data. Data is stored in servers in your country, but it may not be solving the problem. Here's a real example. A multinational bank, this is a real example, spent $2 million to move the data of all their customers across the world to servers physically located in their country. So they have done everything for data localization. The legal team asked a very simple question. They said, it's very nice, it's in servers in our country, but who can access the data? When they tried to answer that question, it opened a can of worms. The data was stored in their servers, undoubtedly servers in their countries, but a foreign cloud service provider provided administrative services. The foreign service provider controlled the encryption keys, which means, in effect, citizens of another country were had access to this data. This means, yes, the data was in servers in your country, but it is subject to foreign oversight. And although it's in your country, people in another country are able to access it. This means they had achieved localization, but they didn't have data sovereignty, right? So, what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is one step beyond localization. It means both the storage and the control. It's not enough if the data is stored in servers in your country. Complete control, like governance, keys, access, should be within your country, within your jurisdiction. This goes beyond the physical location of the data. Sovereignty is a question of which country's laws apply, not merely where the data sits. The data is in your country, but people elsewhere can access it. Data is subject to the laws and governance of the jurisdiction in which it is served. This is to make sure that you can protect and manage it under your laws. No other country's laws can apply. Obviously, if a foreign entity has the keys or has admin rights over your data, then your sovereignty is affected. Sometimes the laws of some countries have extraterritorial jurisdiction. There's an American law called the Cloud Act, which stands for Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data. This has extraterritorial reach. What does it say? It says any US based cloud service provider, as you know, all the big cloud service providers are US based, Microsoft, AWS, or Google, they say you have to provide data to US law enforcement regardless of the way the data is physically stored. This means they said it doesn't really matter where the data is physically. It depends on where the legal entity is. If you are a company which is registered in the US, then under US laws, you have to make this data available regardless of where it is stored, even if it is stored on servers in other countries. The trouble is, sometimes the laws of two different countries can conflict. You have a law in your country that if the data is in my country, my laws will apply. They have a law saying that so long as this is with a company registered in the US, regardless of where the data is, it will be subject to our laws. Because of this, there is a conflict, and it led to what is called hard localization and sovereign clouds. This is to remove the conflict between local and foreign laws. What is hard localization? Hard localization says the data should not only be stored and managed by locally, it should not only be stored locally, but it should also be managed by locally owned companies, not just stored within national borders. We don't want a company registered in another country to handle our data. It should be only locally owned companies so that no other country can claim jurisdiction. Sovereign clouds, a related concept. This is to make sure the data remains under your exclusive local jurisdiction, away from local reach. If it's a local company, no foreign company can say you are registered in our company, so you have to follow our rules. So the drivers for this are because of legal conflicts. Laws like cloud can lead to a conflict with local laws or the country where the data is stored. For national security, you don't want something critical, foreign surveillance of your data or disclosure to another country. It also helps economically because your own domestic cloud service providers develop and you are no longer dependent on hyperscalers in another country where they may be bound by the laws of their country, right? And remember, any country, protecting your citizens' data is your job and you want it to be applied by your local privacy standards, right? Okay, one more concept. This is called data residency. Data residency is you decide I'm going to keep it in one place. This is your organizational policy or preference. You may do it for performance, you may do it for tax or contractual considerations, right? For example, let's say Apple. The European operations are centered out of Ireland. The reason they do it is probably Ireland has the best tax laws, right? So they decide that, okay, we want to keep it in this place, acceptable storage locations. This does not have anything to do with physical or legal controls. The problem is limitations. Residency policies can be overridden. Under US Cloud Act, they can, if you are giving it to one of the, say, a US company like AWS, you are keeping it in a country, all your European data you're keeping in Ireland, it could still be accessible under cloud. It doesn't prevent a foreign jurisdiction from accessing the data. Right, guys? Is it clear?
Yes, definitely.
Did you find it
Yes.
interesting? Actually, all these different concepts are not very clear even from the books I collected from different sources. Give me a moment to drink. Yeah. What is privacy? It's the rights and obligations of individuals about our data. It's our choice. It's my personal data. It's my choice. It should not be used by anyone without my approval. Concerns about privacy have accelerated because of the proliferation of the technology in the internet. PII is being stored all everywhere, and not a month seems to pass without some report of a security breach. Identity theft is common. There are several privacy regulations. About some of these, we need to have a little information. HIPAA, HITECH, COPPA, GLBA, California Consumer Protection Act, DPD, Safe Harbor, Privacy Shield, and GDPR. First is, how did this begin? It was in the 1970s that organizations and governments started using mainframes and collecting a lot of data about their citizens. This was done sometimes with the best of intentions because governments felt if I have all the data of my citizens, it's easier for me to find out what they want and then to be able to serve them better. Corporates also felt that if I collect this data, I know, like for example, when you go and shop online, that is keeping track of your shopping, your preferences. Every time you log in, it will tell you what you want, it will show you what you require. Although this has several advantages, it has a really adverse impact on the privacy of individuals. The right to privacy is very old. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says no one shall be subject to arbitrary interference with the privacy, family, and home. Everybody has a right to protection of the law against such interference. Now what happens is with the advent of these, there are advantages and disadvantages. All privacy laws that you look at, they are trying to strike a balance. On the one hand, we want to protect the rights of individuals. On the other hand, we want to make sure that free trade is possible. We want to make sure that our governments have the data so that they're able to give benefits to the people. Right? Is that correct, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Guys, the class is silent. Am I by any chance going too fast? Mm-hmm.
No, Daniel, I think it is more theoretical, that's why.
Okay. Okay. If it's, I know it's theoretical, but that's not my fault. Huh? Don't shoot the messenger. Right? Okay, now consider this. The mining of our data has existed all along. In every census, what happens? They're taking a lot of data about us. But this was done without any commercial motives and with our informed consent. Informed consent is the key word. For example, we go to doctors, lawyers, tax consultants, we share the most sensitive details about our lives. The problem is today in e-commerce, this is all being taken for profit. And it's often done without our explicit consent or without our understanding implications. Consider this. Every one of us in this room is probably more computer savvy than the common people. How many of us have clicked on the terms and conditions? You go into a website, we collect this information. Please click here to read the terms and conditions. Click this box to agree. Right? How many of us have clicked on this box and agreed? Read it? We haven't, right? If you do that, you'll typically find it runs into several pages, very densely worded. It's almost like legalese. Understanding that requires is very difficult. Most of us blindly click the I agree button. So, do you think that the consent we are giving is informed consent?
No, it's not.
It's not. So, several European countries enacted laws to control the use of personal data by government agencies and large companies. Some countries, Spain, Portugal, even made it a fundamental right in their constitution. The Council of Europe established a framework to prevent the collection of data, unfair collection of data. Way back in 1980, OECD published guidelines on the protection. It's a long term, right? It's usually called the convention. The germ of GDPR you'll find in OECD guidelines. The problem is these were guidelines, so every country was supposed to develop its own legislation. This did not happen. Remember, OECD membership does not is not confined to Europe. It extends beyond Europe, right? Okay, now one thing here, remember what we said, we will learn a little bit about US laws, Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. It means nobody can come and take anything from your house without a court approval. Primarily, the Fourth Amendment dealt with physical intrusion, persons, houses, papers, effects, right? Without a warrant, even the police can't come and search. But in 1967, the US Supreme Court extended it to wiretapping. So it's not just barging into somebody's house, you can't even tap their telephone lines without a warrant from a court. A warrant justifiable by probable cause. What this means is suppose the police suspect that X is a criminal, he may be doing something wrong, we want to tap his phone. They have to go to a judge, they have to show probable cause, then the judge will give a permission saying, yes, you can now go and tap his phone. Warrantless searches are, however, possible under certain conditions. Mehdi, please mute yourself. Okay. When is one of warrantless search is possible? Consent has been given. The guy says, okay, you want to search, you come and search. I don't want a warrant. Evidence is in plain view. For example, suppose the police stop a car. They find some contraband or they find some drugs or they find some guns. Evidence is in plain view. Then you can do this. Exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances means if I don't seize the evidence now, it will be destroyed. Under these three conditions, the police can carry out warrantless searches. There is a rule called the exclusionary rule. What does this mean? Exclusionary rule. Suppose evidence has been seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment, a court may rule that this evidence is not acceptable, right? It's in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Then the evidence is not acceptable. The police will have to prove their case without relying on the evidence, which may not be possible, right? Does it make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the Federal Privacy Act of 1974 came in the aftermath of Watergate. I'm not sure if you guys read about it. What happened in Watergate is when Nixon was the president, he bugged the Democratic headquarters. I think he asked the FBI or some other US government regulator to put a bug there because he was up for re-election. He wanted to find out what his competitors are doing. Then there was a furore. How can federal agencies spy on citizens? Right? Then came this act. The act, the idea was to balance government's need to maintain information about citizens with the right of citizens to keep their personal information private. Remember what I said. The freedom we give our citizens can sometimes be misused by criminals or terrorists. You have to strike a balance. These are the basic policy directives. Restrict disclosure of personal records held by agencies. Suppose a government agency, for some permission, something you have given some data, they can't go share it with anyone else without your permission. You're given it for a particular purpose. Grants individuals the right to access records. You have given your data to some agency. You have a right to tell them, okay, and let me see what data you have about me. If you find that the records maintained by you are inaccurate, you can ask them to correct the data. Fair Practices Act means there is a way to go around collecting, maintaining, and disseminating the records. Nobody can collect your information without asking you. Without your permission, nobody should collect your personal information. Right? As you'll find, when we come to GDPR and privacy laws, all these provisions will come in there. One important law in the US is called HIPAA. HIPAA is meant to protect the healthcare data of US citizens, medical information and healthcare data of US citizens. There are three categories of entities covered under HIPAA. First is the health plans. For example, if you have friends or colleagues who are working in the US, their organizations will have given them health insurance. All that will be part of this. Medicare, any government programs, insurance company, all this is protected by HIPAA. They have to protect the data. Healthcare providers, hospitals, doctors, nursing homes, the information you give them is protected. In the US system, there is something called a healthcare clearinghouse. This is an intermediary between the healthcare provider and the health plan. So, as far as I have been able to understand, if you have an insurance plan, if you're working there, this clearinghouse, you have to submit a claim, and they are a via media or somebody in between to be able to process this and give you that. HIPAA was modified by an act called HITECH. Now, I'll tell you what the dilemma is. Many companies all over the world, including India, we process the healthcare data of US citizens, right? That's what medical transcription does. We are processing the data of healthcare citizens. HIPAA is a US law. You're processing the data of healthcare citizens. HIPAA provisions don't apply. So, what this law says is any business health associate, like a medical transcriptionist, anyone processing the information on behalf of a HIPAA entity, you're doing it for a hospital, healthcare provider, a HIPAA identity. You agree contractually that I will abide by the provisions of HIPAA insofar as the protection of the data of your citizens is concerned. Healthcare data. Correct, guys? Does it all make sense?
Yes.
Right? Remember, HIPAA is an important law. I have seen questions on and off about HIPAA. If you remember this much, what is in the slide, that is more than adequate. Next is Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA. As you know, a lot of kids are on the internet. There are a lot of evil people also who are targeting children on the internet, right? Trying to get their confidence, trying to sexually exploit them. You read about the Epstein files, all that. The purpose of this is to protect children. Anyone under the age of 13. For the purpose of this act, any child under the age of 13. What does this act say? Any website which is catering to children or collecting data from children, they should have a clear notice stating what they collect, what it is used for, and whether any of this information is disclosed to third parties. Contact information of the operator should be prominently displayed. If the kid is below 13, right? Parents or guardians, no, in any case, parents or guardians should have an opportunity to review information. This you're collected some information of the kids. As a parent, you can go and say, let me see what data you have with my kid. I don't want it, delete it. They have to delete it. Suppose a kid below 13 goes and accesses it. Before they make it available, parents or guardians must give verifiable consent. Without the verifiable consent of parents or guardians, they cannot collect any data from children below 13 years of age. Right? Correct, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Was this heavy? All the laws and all?
Yes. Good.
You're all
Yes.
silent, so I guess it was heavy.
Yeah.
Kind of. It's a bit
Sorry?
overwhelming. It's
Sorry?
kind of a bit heavy.
Yeah, but it's essential. Privacy is a very important factor.
Yeah.
Okay, guys,
So,
I badly need a break. Okay,
yeah.
so 15 minutes, we'll take a break. Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, guys. Are we all back? Ladies and gentlemen, are we all back?
Yeah, we are here.
Yep.
Good, good, good. The next law we talk about is the Graham Leach Bliley Act of 1999. This is called GLBA. The actual name is the Financial Modernization Act of 1999. As you probably know, in the US, it's customary to give it the name of the people who moved the bill. So these three guys, Graham, Leach, and Bliley, moved it. So this is called the GLBA Act. Now, what is important for us is that it regulates the way financial institutions deal with the private information of individuals. There was earlier a law called the Glass-Steagall Banking Act, right? This act already actually barred the consolidation of banks, insurance firms, and brokerage because none of them should become too powerful. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. There is a view that if the Glass-Steagall Banking Act of 1933 had not been repealed, then the subprime crisis would not have taken place. What happened in the subprime crisis? Some banks took a major risk with this consolidation, with those what collateralized debt obligations. Then they lost money. Then they came and said, "We are too big to fail. If we fail, the whole country will fail." And they asked for money from the government. So that is the background. But then when they repealed this, what they did is they allowed banks to consolidate. A bank can have an insurance firm, it can have a brokerage firm. Now, the implication for privacy is they can share the personal information of their customers across different companies. You go and open an account with a bank. That guy has a subsidiary that does insurance or brokerage. They will go share it there. So here, what the law says, what is important to us is for privacy. Financial institutions must have a privacy notice and give customers the option to prohibit. When you're opening this, when you give this information, you can tell the financial institution you cannot share it with any other organization, even if it is one of your own sister organizations. They said the board of directors is responsible to ensure the security in a financial institution, and every financial institution must have a security policy in place. So, as far as we are concerned, these are the three important things. Now, come to the California Consumer Privacy Act. Now, remember one thing in, say, Europe, for privacy, you have a single law called GDPR, which deals with all aspects of personal information. It's not like that in the US. They have multiple legislations. We already saw, right? HIPAA deals with healthcare information. States have their own acts. So California has its own Consumer Privacy Act, which is applicable for residents of California. While they were creating this act, they took some part from GDPR. They modeled after GDPR. Remember a couple of things. It applies to any organization that collects PII from residents of California and should satisfy at least one of these conditions. They should have gross revenue of more than $25 million. They should have the PII, personally identifiable information, of at least 50,000 consumers. And they should get at least 50% of the annual revenue from selling the PII of their customers. If any one of these three conditions are fulfilled, the provisions of CCPA will apply. So, as I said, we don't have to go very deep in every law like a lawyer. What we should know is it took some features from GDPR. It said, as a consumer, you have a right to know what information is being collected by you, from you, and how it is shared, how it is used. There is a concept called right to be forgotten. Are you familiar with this, guys? What is the right to be forgotten? What does it mean?
So this right to be forgotten means if I am the data subject and I want any company to remove my data, so I can raise a request to remove all my data, whatever they are using for the process.
Perfect.
It doesn't have I doesn't have to mention for a particular process, but if they have anything regarding
Everything,
my
archives, backups,
everything.
everything
Yes.
has to be removed. Perfect, perfect, Harshita. So we'll talk later in more detail about the right to be forgotten. So this is one thing they took from GDPR. You can opt out of the sale of personal information. You can say, I don't want you to sell my personal information. When you exercise your privacy rights, they should not discriminate against you or retaliate. Sometimes they say, okay, if you're not sharing this, full benefits will not be available to you. That they cannot say. This act was modified by another act called the California Privacy Rights Act 2022, CPRA. This is sometimes referred to as CCPA too because it modified certain provisions of CCPA. The main differences are this. This is considered more friendly to small businesses. See, what did CCPA say? If you have more than 50,000 consumers, you have to comply with this. Now, if you're an SME, it's difficult to comply. So this increased the cutoff. It said below 100,000 consumers, don't worry. If you have more than 100,000 consumers, it will apply. Like GDPR, it has a category called sensitive information. When we talk in a little more detail about the GDPR, we'll talk about this a little more. Sensitive information here means things like your social security, your driver's license, your passport number, your geolocation, things related to your origin and beliefs. Because sometimes there is racial profiling, where you come from, your political beliefs, all this are sensitive information. It adds some consumer rights. The right to correction. I have a right to say what information do you have about me, and if it is wrong, I can right to say correct it. The right to limit sensitive information. Don't take any sensitive information about me. The right to access and opt out. I don't want to share my information with you. And the right to data portability. I say someone else needs my information. You can share this information with them. The next law we look at is the Patriot Act. Okay, now, if you recall, we talked about what happened in 2001. There was the 9/11 attacks, right? Most of the laws we have talked about so far, it is about protecting consumer rights. Here, what happened is this was a direct response to the 9/11 terror attacks. Do you remember what I said? Police and law enforcement all over the world, their concern is the protection we are giving is being misused by terrorists. So this actually increased the powers of law enforcement agencies to be able to deal with terrorism. Remember what we said under this US law, you needed a warrant to tap a phone. In fact, earlier the law was a warrant will be given for only one circuit, which means many of us have more than one phone, right? Now, if a suspected terrorist has two or three phones, the police had to get as many warrants. Now, this says you will give you a blanket warrant. If X is a suspect, we'll give you a warrant. All his circuits, all his numbers you can monitor. They also said service providers may provide information to the government, which, as we know, all of them are doing. Google, all of them are giving this information to the government. Searches and seizures can be carried out without immediate notification of the person. Remember what we said, the Fourth Amendment, all that. Some relaxations were given to the law. It also amends the Computer Fraud Abuse Act to increase the jail sentence. So this was basically they felt the freedoms we are given made it difficult for us to protect the country. So our police and criminal detection agencies require more powers, which is what they did. Remember this much about the act. The Patriot Act was a direct response to the 9/11 terror attacks. The idea was to increase the powers of law enforcement agencies. Right, guys? Is that clear? Well, say something, yes or no, guys?
Yes, Daniel. Yes.
Okay. Okay, now come the Federal Sentencing Guidelines of 1991. Okay, consider this. Have you come across cases all over the world, maybe in our country also, wherever you're living? Similar evidence, two courts can come to different conclusions. Have you come across that? One court rules in a certain way, another court comes in rules in a certain way. So these federal sentencing guidelines were designed to help judges interpret computer crime laws and give uniform rulings or uniform punishments. The reason is this: in domain 7 we'll talk more about incident management, forensic investigations. The challenge you face is a judge may know the law, but they are not experts in computer crime. So this is to help them take decisions, right? Do you think that is good, guys?
Uh, yes, actually, it is very beneficial.
Yeah. Now, remember what we said: the lack of due care is considered negligence, right? This is also called the prudent person rule. What it says is senior executives are expected to take responsibility for ensuring due care. This means if a senior executive does not take due care, as a result of that, there is a breach, then that person can be personally liable, because the obvious step you should take, which any reasonable, prudent, sensible person should do, you have not taken. However, there is another part of it. The punishment for infractions may be minimized if organizations and executives demonstrate that they apply due diligence in the conduct of the information security duties, right? That means we have done some preparatory work for information security. See, consider this. Somebody did not take some action which they should have taken. It doesn't mean that they can automatically be found guilty. So it outlined three burdens of proof for negligence, right? How do you say this guy is negligent? There are three burdens of proof. The person accused of negligence must have a legally recognized obligation. Suppose there's a law that says this has to be reported. Then you can go and ask that guy, why didn't you report? There is no provision that this should be done. Now, after the event, you know what happens? Whenever there is an incident, you investigate. After the event, it's very easy to be wise. Have you noticed that? Even in personal matters, some people will say, oh, you could have done this, you could have done that. After the event, anybody can be wise. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, yes, yeah.
yeah. So they should have a legally recognized obligation to do that. The person must have failed to comply with a recognized standard. There is a standard which says this has to be done. That guy was lacking, guy or lady was lacking, they didn't do it. The most important thing in my view is there's a causal relationship, right? This guy was negligent. That means he was supposed to do something, he didn't do it, right? Some event occurred, right? But there is no relationship between the two. There is no causal relationship. Just because this guy didn't do something and some event occurred, you can't say this guy is responsible unless you can establish that there's a relationship between the damage that occurred and the negligence on this fellow's part. It is true, this guy didn't do something, he was negligent, but whatever happened was not because of that. Correct? Does it make sense, guys?
Yes.
I find actually laws quite interesting. Okay, now come to PII. PII is anything which can identify a specific individual or de-anonymize previous anonymous data. Sometimes what do? We anonymize data. But then suppose somebody is able to de-anonymize. I'll explain to you in an example later. How is it defined? Any information that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity, such as your name. SSN in the US is a social security number. In other parts, it may be your tax card number, it may be your national identity card, whatever, biometric records, etc. Anything else that is linked or linkable. For example, I have some data about all of you. I have some other medical or financial data. I'm able to link up the two. Then I come to know something sensitive about your health, about your financial condition. Examples are all these: SSN, etc. Information that is linked or linkable: date, birth, place of religion, etc. Right? We'll come to this in a little more detail. For now, try answering this question. Good, good. Everybody got it right. Perfect, guys. Okay, here's another question. Okay, okay, many of us have got confused, right? They can be held accountable for lapses and information security matters. This is called due care. Many of us have got confused. We are choosing due diligence. It is due care, right? Due diligence is what? The preparatory work that we do in order to prepare for this so that we don't have any surprises. Okay, one more facet of personal data. Do you recall I said as a general rule, you can assume that the privacy regulations in Europe are more stringent than the US, right? Significant difference is there. EU laws like GDPR safeguard the privacy rights of individuals. They also say the personal data of EU residents cannot be transferred out of EU until you are satisfied that the destination country can protect it similarly according to the provisions of GDPR. Ajit Jha, what are you doing? I can see your name and a blue mark going around. Okay. The US doesn't have a similar comprehensive framework, which we talked about. There are multiple laws. Incidentally, under some US laws, like we saw the Cloud Act, there's another law called Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows them to survey, to keep foreign citizens under observation. There's one law called the adequacy decision. Remember what we said? It doesn't allow you to transfer data to another country unless you're satisfied that the protection they give the personal data is adequate to meet the standards of EU, right? Now, look at the way data transfer was handled over the years. At first, there was a law called the Safe Harbor Act. Under the Safe Harbor Act, American companies, if they're taking the data of EU citizens, they could self certify. I will protect your data according to EU data. At that time, it was not called GDPR, it was called Data Directive. Then one guy called Max Schrems, a very interesting character. You must read about him. I really like this guy. I mean, he fights for personal freedom. He was an Austrian student. He filed a case that Facebook did not uphold his European privacy rights. And the court accepted it. It was struck down. Safe harbor was struck down. To replace that, they came up with something called the Privacy Shield. The Privacy Shield put stronger obligations on companies, American companies, which handle the personal data of Europeans. There were clear safeguards, transparency obligations on US government access. They said you have to disclose which US government agencies are taking the data of our citizens. Redressal capable possibilities. However, the problem was it was just a slightly rehashed version of the Privacy Shield, of Safe Harbor. By now, this guy, Max Schrems, was a practicing lawyer. He filed another case. This is called Schrems 2. Again, the European Court, CGEU stands for Court of Justice of European Union. It struck down Privacy Shield also. Then they came up with what is called Data Privacy Framework. This is also called Data Privacy Shield 2.0. And it was adopted in 2023. This places binding safeguards which limit access to data by US intelligence authorities. There are limits on the access that American intelligence agencies can have to the data of Europeans, and they have to take only what is proportionate to protect national security. Enhanced oversight of activities by US intelligence agencies, and an independent and impartial redressal mechanism called the Data Protection Review Court. This is the current state. Okay, if you recall, when we were talking about OECD guidelines way back in 1980, I told you that the germ of GDPR will be found here. What are the principal provisions of OECD? Collection limitation. When you're collecting personal data of anyone, it should be limited. That means whatever you need, you collect. You should take it by lawful and fair means. You should take it with the knowledge of the subject. You can't take anything without their knowledge. Data quality. When you're collecting the personal data of any citizens, you have to keep it complete, current, and relevant for the purpose. You have to maintain the quality. Purpose specification. When you're collecting data, you should clearly specify what purpose you're collecting it for, right? Clearly specify why you are collecting it. Use limitation means when you're telling them I'm collecting it for a particular purpose, you can use it only for that purpose. If you want to use it for any other purpose, you have to go back and ask that subject, look, I want to use it for some other purpose. Are you okay? Of course, remember there are always exceptions. Authority of law. If the police are investigating a crime or affairs of state, let's say counter espionage, they're trying to catch a foreign spy, then all these are exempt, right? They're exempt. There are exemptions. Safeguards. When we collect personal data, it is our job to protect the data. We have to protect it against unauthorized access, loss, modification, disclosure, etc. Openness. When we are collecting data, we should clearly tell them what is our policy, what are our practices, how are we protecting the data. This should be openly communicated. Individual participation. You or some government agency have collected my data. I have a right to say, okay, show me the data that you have about me. If I find this erroneous, there is a mistake in the data, I can challenge it and say, now I'm giving you the correct data. Correct the data. Finally, accountability. Anybody who collects data is accountable for all these protections. If they don't do this, then they can be sued for this. Right? Okay, GDPR is a regulation to protect the personal data and privacy of EU residents. Non-compliant organizations can face fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of the annual global turnover. Some of the important provisions. If there's a data breach, within 72 hours of finding about the data breach, it has to be reported. Companies should allow users to export the data and to delete it. You say, okay, agency X has collected your data. You say, okay, Y also needs the data. Here's my authorization. Give the data to Y. Now X has to give the data to Y in a commonly readable format. Don't give it in a proprietary format which nobody can read. If they say delete the data, then they have to delete the data. The right to be forgotten principles, which will come in a moment. GDPR principles are the 5 principal things which are very similar to OECD. Collect data lawfully, fairly, transparently. Purpose limitation, whatever purpose you are collecting it for, use it only for that. Data minimization. See, for a particular purpose, you need some data. Collect only the data. Don't collect anything more. Like, for example, you go to some places to buy something. Everything those guys say, we want your phone number. Why should I give my phone number? If it's not necessary, don't collect my data. You have to keep the data accurate. Storage limitation means you collected it for a particular purpose. That purpose is over. Why should you hold on to the data? Destroy it, because the longer you hold it, the greater there is a likelihood of breach. You have to protect the integrity and the confidentiality of the data, and you're accountable for this. Okay, remember one thing, under West American laws, it is called PII. In GDPR, it's called personal data. Okay, the definition of personal data under GDPR is wider than the definition of PII under US data laws, right? The GDPR definition is anything that can be used to directly or indirectly identify them. This includes what all? Not usual everything like email address, bank account details, etc. Even IP address. This is interesting. A court in Germany held that even a dynamic IP address is personal data. What do you think? Do you think it's correct or not? It's a dynamic IP address, because what the court said is, remember what we said, identifiable. When you combine this information with the data from the internet service provider, who is keeping a log of which dynamic address they allocated to which user at which time, when you combine these two, you can identify the person who used that IP address. So they said this is also personal data. Pretty stringent, isn't it?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
That's why I
Easy
said
for
that definitely.
traceability.
Sorry?
It's easy for traceability.
Exactly. So these are the four parts. Any information relating to identified or identifiable natural person. Okay, one more thing. What's a natural person, guys?
A living human being.
Exactly. See, consider this under law, even like a corporate, right? It's an artificial person or a legal person. For example, just as you have a home, you have a car, your company also has offices, they have addresses, they have assets. This law is not concerned with protecting legal persons. It's only natural persons, which are living, breathing human beings like you and me, made of flesh and blood, as Harshita said. Any information, employment records, private life, activities, contact info, all this work, home address, phone number, see, even IP addresses, online identifiers like and cookies. Suppose you are an organization that has set up, let's say you have a website. Let's say you are in India. You are not in Europe, but residents of Europe are accessing your website. You are putting cookies in their browsers to identify their habits. This will attract the provisions of GDPR. Related to an individual, identified or identifiable, this is what I said. With the help of the ISP, an individual can be identified from the IP address. The point is today the rise of the big data and so many bits of pieces of our lives are in different places. It's very easy for someone with access to multiple sources to be able to put it to a through together like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, one more about this. Remember, we said identified and identifiable. Here we have to look at the possibility and the likelihood. I gave you the example of a German court, Patrick Breyer versus Bundesrepublik Deutschland. They said even dynamic IP addresses. Natural and legal, we already talked about, right? Okay, within this personal data, there is a category called special or sensitive data. Remember, when we're talking about California law, I said this is something they have borrowed from GDPR. What they said is there are special categories of information which are even more critical, which can be cause a significant risk to individuals. Personal data revealing racial or ethnic origin, they can be racial profiling. Political opinions, people, they abuse each other, kill each other today because of political opinions. Religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union memberships, genetic data, biometric data, data concerning health, even things like, sexual orientation, because in some places people who are gay or lesbian may be targeted. All these are considered especially sensitive, special, which require even more protection. They require extra safeguards. You should identify. See, remember, if you're processing this, why you're processing, you should be able to identify a lawful basis. You don't need to remember Article 6 and all that. I given it just for information. There should be a lawful basis for processing. There are exceptions under Article 9. Remember what I told you, if it's under, if it's like criminal investigations, state security, there are exceptions. You must, for information like this, sensitive data, you have to apply the strongest possible security measures like encryption, strict access controls. And you must do, before you process this data, you must carry out a data protection impact assessment, which means you ask yourself, what am I collecting? If this gets breached, what will be the consequences? And how do I, are the protection measures I have, are they adequate? Right? Okay, try answering this very simple question. Good. See, when there is more than one possibility, this is the broadest. Everything will fall under this. Very good. All EU residents. Okay, let's look at the key provisions of GDPR. Consent. You cannot collect data without consent. Here is something interesting. Silence, pre-tick boxes, or lack of activity do not constitute consent. For example, let's say you go to any website, it says we are using cookies to collect the information. There is a box here. If you agree, please tick this box. Suppose they show you this box pre-ticked and say, if you do not agree, then untick it. That is not consent. Absence of activity on the part of the subject does not denote consent. That's why it should be blank. The subject has to go click it and say, yes, I agree. Right to be informed, right? You should know. They have to inform you what data they are taking, why they are taking it, how it will be used. Right to restrict processing. As a subject, I can say, I don't want you to process it anymore. Right to be forgotten. We have another slide. We'll talk about it in detail later. Data breaches, as I said, within 72 hours, you have to report it. Okay, the background for this, it's quite long. Just, bear with me. Look at the high important things. Back in 1998, there's a Spanish guy called Mario Costella Gonzalez. I hope it got pronunciation right. So this guy had some financial difficulties. As a result, he had to pay some taxes or something. A property of his was put up for auction. So as you might expect, this was reported in the newspapers. Then it went online. This guy, whatever was to be paid, he paid it, settled it, and forgot about it. He wanted to move on with his life. The problem was every search, whenever anybody typed his name in the Google search box, it was showing that yes, his property was put online because of some arrears of tax or something like that. He was seriously miffed. He said, look, there's a problem. I have resolved the problem. I have moved on. Why are you constantly stigmatizing me? It is over. Every search, years later, do you want to continue to stigmatize me? So then this went, I think it was Google, they argued that this is done by Google America. A lot of things went on, but ultimately the court ruled in his favor, right? And Google was asked to remove this from their search engines. The notion of the right to be forgotten is derived from numerous pre-existing European views. This can vary. Apparently, in the United States, the view is more like transparency. What we are saying is the truth. There is merit in both. But his contention is also correct. It's over. I have not committed any crime. It's all over. Why are you continuing to stigmatize me? So, Article 17 of GDPR, actually, technically, this is called the right to erasure. Usually, we say right to be forgotten. It's technically called right to erasure. It says all this. If you make a request to the data controller, then all your data should be released. And as somebody said, I think Harshita said, everywhere. Replicated copies, backup, archives, everywhere you have to remove it without any cost to the data subject. Okay. Under certain conditions, not all, you have to conduct a data privacy impact assessment. Remember, these article numbers are given just for information. So long as you just remember what this data privacy impact assessment, what is it? Before you use any process, any data, sensitive data, especially a type of processing using new technologies, and you're doing it on a large scale, which may result in high risk to the rights and freedoms of a natural person. Before you do it, prior to the processing, you have to carry out an assessment of the impact and the protection measures that you have, are they adequate? This should be done before you begin the data processing activity. If you have a data protection officer, you have to involve them. In some parts of the world, now see, let's say, for example, you're operating today, even in India, everywhere, data protection is a major concern. All organizations don't have the expertise. You may be a small organization, you don't have a data protection officer. So there are third parties which will do this for you for a fee. But remember, regardless of whether you're doing it in-house or you're outsourcing it, you are responsible for it. Okay. Oops, I'm so sorry. I forgot to put an animation. Anyway, so when is it required? Not all cases, as I said. Whenever it's likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of individuals. Examples are these: Automated decision making. Suppose, see, for example, let's say you're applying for a credit card. In some cases, it's an automated decision. Based on this algorithm, it's taking a decision. Even hiring algorithms, based on this, it will shortlist an application. Before you do this, you have to do a DPIA. When we say large scale processing or special categories of data, remember we said sensitive, it could be things like health, genetic, or biometric, and racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, or religious beliefs. Whenever we are doing systematic monitoring, for example, in all cities now, CCTV cameras are operated by our police forces. They are capturing all this. Now they also have to carry out a DPIA. Am I protecting the data? This data, can it be hacked? Can it be taken by someone else? Many cases the data is being matched or combined. For example, let's say the police are trying to look for a particular person. They will take this feed in one place, they'll take the photograph of that guy in one place and use an algorithm to try to match it, right? Sometimes this can go wrong. If there's bad weather, the picture is blurry, you might end up identifying a wrong man. Processing data of vulnerable individuals, very important. Children, elderly, asylum seekers, these are very vulnerable. They are not able to defend themselves. Using innovative technology, sometimes what happens, you are combining. You are not using fingerprints and facial recognition separately. You're combining the two. It is more intrusive. When you're combining multiple factors of technology, this becomes more intrusive. Okay, this is the concept called material scope, right? GDPR applies to processing data wholly or partly by automated means. That means even if some part of it you're doing manually, it still applies. Processing other than by manual automated means. We have a manual filing system. This still applies. It does not apply. Remember, we said there are some exceptions. It does not apply when? In the course of activity which falls outside the scope of law, public security, defense, national security, right? Your security agencies, police, etc. It could be something to do with the foreign policy of the country. By a natural person in a purely personal or household activity. For example, some of our members are from Europe, right? Germany, Italy, all that. So let's say they're arranging a picnic, they're going out somewhere. They are just doing this just for fun. They're collecting all this information. It is purely for a domestic purpose, like a holiday. Obviously, this is not something where GDPR should apply. By any competent authority for the purpose of prevention investigation of criminal activities. So a criminal can't say, before the police come and take his data, they can't say, no, 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 you have to, I have my rights, you have to take my permission. All that can't be done, obviously. Right, guys?
Yes, Daniel.
Your voice is sounding very tired, Harshita.
No, I'm not tired. Actually, I'm a law student as well, so it's very
Oh,
difficult.
so it's all, I mean, you should tell me whether it's correct or not then. Do you want to add something?
Sure.
You're a law student? Wow.
Yeah, by education, I'm a lawyer.
Wonderful. Then I should be more cautious when I talk about laws, huh?
So basically, Daniel, the thing is, when you are studying law, it is always good to study with case laws. Otherwise, it's very boring. Yeah.
Okay. So are you quite well versed in GDPR and all, Harshita, or only
Yeah,
Indian laws?
yes. So GDPR and privacy law, it is my specialization, and my dissertation, is in privacy laws only. So
Oh,
I
wow.
have
I
all
would
the.
like to read your dissertation sometime, Harshita, if you don't mind sharing it.
Yeah, sure.
You can send it to me in WhatsApp. I would love to read it. As a
Uh,
banker, we go quite a bit into law, otherwise also Contract Act, all that, Negotiable Instruments Act, etc. Right? Anyway, here remember, you do not expect, I mean, I'm for the benefit of everyone, don't be intimidated by the laws. You are not expected to have the expertise of a lawyer. So long as you remember the provisions high level, that is good enough, because ultimately we are operating in a legal environment, correct? Now in GDPR, you require some key roles. What are the key roles? Supervisory authority, data controller, data processor, and data protection officer. These are the key roles. Data controller and processor are not mutually exclusive, which means in a small organization, the same entity may be collecting data and processing the data. The primary responsibility for compliance is that of the controller, right? The data processor is a subsidiary role. Like, for example, let's say you are collecting data, you're the data controller, but there's a huge amount of data. You're outsourcing it to a third party. Look, you process it for me. So, data processor is a subsidiary role, but they also have some responsibility, which we'll come to. A data processor has to process the data in accordance with the documented instructions of the controller. Controller has told him use this data for this purpose. The processor can't start using it for some other purpose. Okay, the supervisory authority, every EU member has to appoint a supervisory authority who's something like a judicial authority to enforce GDPR and monitor the application of GDPR to protect individual rights with relation to the processing of personal data. What should an SA do? SA should contribute to the consistent application of GDPR throughout the EU. Sometimes, in certain cases, there may be more than one. The data may go into two different EU countries. There are two SAs. They have to collaborate and cooperate with each other. Very important, they have to act with complete independence. They should not allow anyone to tell them what to do. They should be free from external influence, whether direct or indirect. They cannot seek instructions from anybody, including the government. They cannot seek instructions. Okay, now come to the data controller. The data controller is a natural or legal person, which means if it's a small thing, one individual is doing it. If it's a large corporation, that is the data controller, a legal person. It could be a public authority, agency, etc. Uh, they will determine the purpose and the means of such processing. Yeah. Data controller will determine why the data is being collected and how the processing will be done. Data controller is the one who decides, yes, I'm going to collect personal data. They should have a legal basis. They should determine the legal basis. Without a legal basis, they cannot do that. They are going to decide what data am I going to collect? Why are we collecting it? The purpose. From whom are we going to collect it? Are we going to disclose data? Consider this. Let's say you have some data. Some agency, some third party comes and asks you for the data. Are you going to share it or not? That's something, a decision you have to take. There are certain provisions of law. They also determine how long to retain the data. Decisions, yes, Praveen. Yeah, Praveen. Praveen. Okay, I think that is a mistake.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I double muted. My
Okay.
question is a data controller point. You here is mentioned legal person. The means a legal team member will be the data controller or technical side person will be the data controller.
Praveen, were you there when we discussed what a natural person is and what a legal person is? You were not there?
Yeah, I was there.
So a legal person is any entity. It may be a human, it could be a company. See, when you're talking about a law, we are not really concerned with who is doing it. Let's say it's a small place. A is an individual who's collecting it. So then it is a natural person. There is a corporation. Let's call it X, right? Corp X. Then it is a legal person. That's what it means. Within that team, etc., is not, we are not concerned about. If it's a corporation, then it's a legal person, right?
Okay.
Anything which is not normal. Consider this. For example, there are clubs, there are educational institutions, not necessarily a corporate. These are anything not a living human being is a natural legal person. Okay, clear?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. See,
Thanks.
okay, we said what the data controller does. Which software to use, which program to use is a tangential decision. This can be taken by the data processor. What are the responsibilities of a data controller? Primary responsibility for complying with GDPR is that of the data controller. They should not only comply with GDPR, they should also be able to demonstrate it. Remember what we said, the lack of due care is negligence, and for that we need records. That means for this, that these guys should have enough records, logs, policies, procedures. They should implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data, taking into account nature, scope, purpose, and risk. Suppose we are collecting on a small scale. A certain level of controls are required. We are collecting on a large scale. We have to take a larger thing. Remember one thing, laws will not specifically tell you you do this, you do that. All they will tell you is that the measures or controls that you have should be appropriate for the scope, right? Suppose we are collecting sensitive information like what we talked about, racial, all that, then you need more protection because the law says this is very sensitive information, requires more protection. Is it clear, guys? Guys, I just want to ask one thing. Am I going too fast? I'm aware that some of us, many of us, don't have a background in law, and these can be a bit confusing. If I'm going too fast, please stop me and tell me. Okay?
Yeah, please show.
Anything not clear, please don't hesitate to stop me. Yeah, ST, go ahead.
One question. Is the
Mhm.
supervisory authority, the SA, the same as the Information Commissioner's Office?
I don't know about the designations. This is the term used in GDPR. The designations may vary from in countries. As far as I know, the supervisory authority everywhere is called supervisory authority. Whether it is that, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Can I answer that? I
Yeah,
have the
sure.
answer for that. So, by supervisory authority, they are saying it can be anyone in the department. They just highlight a broad term, supervisory authority. We can name it anything, but their function would be completely same as the supervisory authority that is defined under GDPR. So we can name it anything. It can be data protection officer as well. It depends on the scale of the company. If it is a small scale company, DPO can act as both. If it is a medium one, we can determine based on the revenue and all. And then if it is a big scale, then we have to have a two different rules for that.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, that's
Thanks,
outside the
Ashita.
scope of what we are learning. Okay, next is whatever controls we put in, we should periodically review and update. Remember PDCA that we talked about. Remember, we said we should be able to demonstrate. That's why we need documentation. There should be audit trails to help to prove compliance. We should have data protection policies to make sure the data is being protected and processed properly. There will be a code of conduct and an approach. See, you can't become a data controller without getting approved. So there is a certification mechanism, code of conduct, which you have to go through. Now come to data processing. All these are data processing. It means if you do anything with the data, it is data processing. Okay, now come to data processor, right? Data processor acts on behalf of the data controller. Again, data processor may be a natural person, legal person, public authority, etc. On behalf of means the data controller has collected the data and told the subject why you are collecting it. Then the data processor has to process the data in accordance with the directives of the controller. They cannot exceed that. Controller has said you use it for X purpose. The processor can't say, okay, let me use it for Y purpose also. Decisions regarding the purpose for which the data is collected and processed will be as directed by the controller. The controller decides the purpose and means of processing and the how and why of processing. What are the duties of a processor? Documented instructions. See, they can't do whatever they want, saying, okay, I had an oral instruction from the data controller. That's not there. It should be on the basis of documented instructions. The data they're processing is obviously very sensitive. They have to keep it confidential. With regard to compliance, they should assist their data controller because they are doing the actual processing. So audit trails, documentation, they have to maintain. When, let's say, at some point the data controller says, okay, I don't want to give my data to you anymore and terminate it, they have an obligation to delete or return all the personal data, all copies. Suppose the data controller is, let's say, under investigation or there's an inquiry from the regulator, they have to assist them. Data processor has to assist them in demonstrating compliance by for audits, inspections, etc. Data processor can do only authorized processing, which means it is in accordance with the written instructions of the controller or required by law. This is also possible. Under law, something is asked for. If it comes into that category, you have to do it. Like third party is giving another third party, your processor may give it to a sub processor. Processors cannot subcontract to a third processor unless permitted by the controller by specific or general written authorization. Without that, they cannot. Suppose they're making any changes, they have to give the controller advance information, give them an opportunity to object to the change. They can't say, okay, I changed that guy, now I have another sub-processor telling them post facto. They have to do it in advance, give them an opportunity to object. I don't want it given to someone else. The sub-processor is bound by the same legal, mandatory, contractual requirements that the processor is subject to. Okay. The data protection officer is compulsory in the following cases. When the processing is being carried out by public authority, if the core activity is regular systematic monitoring on a large scale, for example, like traffic cameras, that kind of thing on a large scale. If our core activity is processing special categories of data that we talked about, let's say racial profiling, all that. By core activity, we mean the key operations to achieve the goals of the data controller and the processor. This will be an inextricable part of the activity. This is not a peripheral part of the activity. When we say large scale, it's not related to the number of subjects. It's related to the number of subjects, not the organization size. You who are doing the processing may be a small entity, but you're processing the data of a huge number of subjects, then it is on a large scale. Regular or systematic monitoring means all forms of internet based trafficking, not confined to the online environment. Okay, now comes data transfer and data transit. Right? These are two different things. Data transit is not the same as data transfer. Transfer takes place only when the data is processed. So, what is transit? You know how data goes on the internet. You don't know where the data is going. Technically, packets are being routed all over by the internet. Just because data goes through a certain country, it doesn't mean the provisions of GDPR apply because it's only transiting. Electronic access to personal data by travelers who are physically located for a short period of time. Let's say a traveler is traveling outside EU. He's logging into a EU based computer from a foreign airport. This does not constitute transfer. When a member, individual in a member state, merely uploads personal information onto a website hosted in a state or a member state so that the information can be accessed by anyone connected to the internet. Guy is posting something, let's say on Facebook. This can be accessed from anywhere in the internet. This does not constitute data transfer. It is only data transit. Okay, now come to the adequacy.
Daniel,
Yeah.
not clear with it. Can you please repeat it?
Which one?
Data transfer versus data transit.
Yeah. Okay. Arvind, I'll come to you later. What happens with data when you're transferring data from one place to another? Your routers will send the data depending on wherever you have, there is, how routers work, right? Suppose you're sending from point A to point B, right? The routers will see wherever there is less traffic, let's say they're sending this way. Then they say, okay, there is not enough traffic, it will send it this way. Let's say it is sending it through something in Europe, right? The routers are transferring. Unless the data is getting um, processed in that country, it is not it's not a transfer. So let's say You're transferring from A to B, which are outside the scope of Europe, GDPR. But the data is transiting, the routers are sending it through Europe. Then it doesn't constitute transfer, it is only transit.
Understood.
Clear?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I think I assumed I guess you don't have a background in technology, networking. Is that correct?
I do have, but I couldn't
Okay. You
correlate
can
it.
correlate. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
I should have explained it. Yeah, Arvind, somebody raised a hand, right?
Yes, one quick question. So let's say if the processor or the sub-processor is not within the EU boundary line, then what kind
Hmm.
of legal obligations they need to follow?
The same thing will apply because you're processing the data of EU citizens.
No, so what kind of legal obligations? Just a legal contractual would be okay, or is there anything else that
No, no,
also
no.
needs
It's
to be
like
followed?
this. GDPR is a law, like we talked about cloud, right? It has extraterritorial jurisdiction. What does it say? Remember the example I gave you. You're setting up a website in India. Residents of EU are accessing it. You are tracking their IP addresses. You are putting a cookie on the browser. Then the provisions of GDPR will apply. How exactly it will be implemented is not a question to which I have an answer.
No,
You,
I asked for something else.
yeah.
Just what I was asking is, let's say I am the data processor, okay, and
Mm-mm,
I have a sub-processor who is sitting within India, okay.
mm-mm.
And so, what kind of legal agreements that needs to take place from the data
I don't
controller
know.
to
I
be
don't know that. I don't have that
okay?
answer. That is a little too detailed about the law. I don't know that. And you won't be tested about things like that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, if you recall, we said adequacy. What does GDPR say? You can't transfer of personal data to third countries or international organizations can take place when the commission decides that there's an adequate level of protection. That means, let's say you are, for business reasons or whatever, let's say you're in Europe, let's say you're in country A. You want to transfer the data to country B, which is outside Europe, right? You can do that only if you're satisfied that there is an adequate level of protection. That is the level of protection that GDPR requires, other country can also provide, right? So how do you determine what are the criteria? Remember, there are no hard and fast rules. These are laws. How exactly, what is the rule of, see, what does it say? You have to decide whether the rule of law, respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, relevant legislation, all this is available in the country to which you transfer. Obviously, opinions may differ. X may say we have, Y may say we don't have, right? Again, remember, whether this will apply or not, suppose there is a case, this goes up before a court, a judge or a court has to take a call. We can't give an opinion on the basis of certain facts here, nor is it required for this case. We have to understand the provisions of the law. We are not going to go so deep into, in such and such case what will we do is not part of the question. Remember, we are not going into the same depth as a law course. They should have effective and functioning independent supervisory authority in the third country. You should be able to show that this country, third country, has a supervisory authority or equivalent of that with the responsibility for ensuring protection with the data protection rules. Third is the international commitments of the third country with regard to participation in multilateral or regional systems for the protection of personal data. As you can see, opinions about this can differ. In fact, remember I said GDPR has extraterritorial jurisdiction. I have read of one case where under this a case was filed in England for about from mainland Europe. A judge in England said, no, this cannot apply. So the courts can take a different view. Ultimately, how issues will get decided in the court is something we don't have to go into. Now, let's say there are cases where the country does not offer adequate protection. We cannot arrive at a conclusion that they give adequate protection. Still, can we transfer data? There are two provisions. One is called standard contractual clauses, the other is called binding corporate rules. Standard corporate clauses are used for data transfers between different organizations. X is an organization which is in the EU. They want to transfer to Y, which is not in the EU. And they don't have the confidence that they have an adequate level of protection, right? to comply with the requirements of GDPR for transferring personal data to countries outside the European Economic EEA's Economic Association, I think. So here what happens, there are standard predefined clauses. It's like an agreement, a contract, standard pre-approved clauses. These will define what are the specific safeguards that are required to give the data the protection that is required under GDPR. Now, what is the impact of this? This contractually binds the importer. So X is in EU, Y is outside EU. This guy Y is signing a standard contractual clause saying, I'll protect the data in accordance with your requirements. If they fail to do that, they can be sued, right? This is a contractual agreement. Clear, guys? Remember this for the exam point of view. SCC is when you're transferring data between two different organizations. Suppose it's within the same organization, binding corporate rules. You know, let's say you're a multinational. In fact, when I was training for a multinational, I went and checked the website of EU. Their name was there. Now consider this. Let's say organization X is a multinational. They have offices all over the world, including EU. Now they have to transfer data from some place which is in the EU to some place which is outside EU, right? So what did they say? This allows multinational companies to transfer data to their offices outside the EU. In this binding corporate rules, they'll have a corporate rule. This will be enforced by every member of the group and they are legally binding. This will be defined, drafted by the company. What is the company saying? X company is saying, regardless of where I transfer the data, within my offices, anywhere in the world, even outside the EU, I will give it the same level of protection which is required under EU laws, under GDPR. This has to be approved by the supervisory authority, then given to the European Data Protection Board. Once it is binding, now what happens? Corporate X is legally bound by this. If they do not protect the data and there is a breach, then they can get sued for it by the data subjects, right? So SCC is two different organizations. Binding corporate rules is the same organization, multinational, transferring data between different offices of theirs. So guys, tell me, did we learn quite a bit about GDPR?
There is actually that those are under the GDP rule, or this is different complaints actually.
We are talking about GDPR only, right?
Okay.
So far, we are talking only under GDPR.
Thank you.
Okay, now come to compliance. So what is compliance? Compliance means an external agency has a mandate. They're asking you to adhere to something. They have some expectations and they have the means of enforcing them. Like your regulators, your government, they have the means of enforcing them. That's why we have to comply. Important thing to remember is compliance is the baseline. You may go beyond the baseline. There's only the first step. This is the absolute minimum. Suppose you're an organization which is operating in different places. Let's say, for example, you're planning to open your offices in a different country. Now, finding out what are the compliance requirements, this can be expensive, time consuming. Usually, organizations will empanel or consult lawyers or consultants to understand the environment there, right? Give me a moment, guys, to drink water. Okay. So compliance is integral because we have to protect the stakeholders' faith and loyalty and their interests. Again, in CISSP, you don't have to have the expertise of a law graduate, but we should have some knowledge of these laws. Again, a few important US laws. The Computer Security Act of 1987, it prescribes the minimum security practices for federal systems. Okay, one important distinction you should know. NIST stands for National Institute of Standards and Technology. This is comes under the Department of Commerce. They are responsible for unclassified non-military government systems. These are standards which are applicable in industry. NSA is for classified government and military systems. Remember this basic thing. NIST is for primarily civilian non-military use. NSA is for military and government. Incidentally, Computer Security Act was withdrawn and replaced by FISMA. FISMA stands for Federal Information Security Management Act. This act recognized that information security is necessary for national security. It established guidelines and security standards which all federal agencies have to meet. This includes state agencies which implement federal programs like Medicare. Sometimes consider this. Let's say you're in the private sector, but you are processing data for a US government agency, then FISMA will also apply to you. Right, guys?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. This came in response to major financial scams. Some of you may have read about it, Enron, Tyco, World.com. Now, what happened is the purpose of this was to restore faith. When these big companies could fold up, and this is when that Arthur Anderson folded up. People lost faith in public accounting firms. So here, what did it say? It said there should be no conflicts of interest. It turned out that these public accounting firms were giving contrary advice. They were giving corporates one advice, they were telling their clients advice to the contrary. So this is why they said you can't do two things. You can't audit their accounts and you can't give them advisory services. That's a conflict of interest.
Abdullah.
Guys, please mute yourself. It brought in the provision of whistleblower protection. SOX has an impact on this. What it said is, see what happened at that time is board and senior management said we were not aware of it. This is why SOX said you have to sign off on the controls. If executives knowingly sign off on inaccurate financial statements, they could be held personally accountable. To deal with this, I think I mentioned this yesterday, the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, came up with a standard to audit the third-party service providers. SOC 1 deals with financial statements. SOC 2 and SOC 3, okay, SOC 2 deals, it's an audit and compliance report which deals with all this privacy, security, processing integrity, confidentiality. SOC 3 is similar, but it's a light version of SOC 2. In SOC 3, there is sensitive information. It has details about the tests carried out by the auditor, the auditor's opinion about the effectiveness of the controls. That's why circulation should be restricted. This sensitive information should not fall into the wrong hands. SOC 3 is a, what do you call, it's a sanitized version. It doesn't have any sensitive details. Most organizations put their SOC 3 reports on the internet, on the web page, because prospective customers should know, okay, what have they done with the SOC reports. Incidentally, domain 6, we'll study SOC 1, 2, 3 in more detail. Okay, here's a question. This is a tricky question. Huh? Okay, and all this is organization suffered an attack in which customer credit cards were compromised. Under PCI DSS, which of the following organizations may choose to pursue an investigation of this matter? Which of the following organizations, right? Remember what we said, PCI DSS is not a law. So do you think the first investigation will be done by law enforcement or FBI? Yes, guys? Yes or no? This is not a law.
PCA is not law. FPA
It's a
also not present.
contractual agreement. So we can safely rule out A and D, right? We are talking of an investigation, remember. So what has happened? Customer cards were compromised. An investigation. Why is an investigation being done? To find out what exactly happened. Based on that investigation, if there's a case, you may go file a case with law enforcement. But the first stage in investigation will be done by the organization that issued the cards, right? So it's the bank is the appropriate authority. Trickier?
Okay, got it. The first investigation should be done by the organization
Yeah.
only.
Okay. Okay, there's a question about previous thing, SSC, PCI Security Standards Council. See, the PCI Security Standards Council is an apex body which lays down the standards. They are not going to do the investigation. Wherever there's a breach, they're only laying down the standards. It's like saying this law was passed. Is the court or the parliament going to come and investigate, right? They won't investigate. They only lay down the standards. Agreed, guys? Okay, good. Everybody got this right.
Yes.
I'm so happy. Everybody got this right. Data processor. Okay, one more. Okay, very good. Most of us got it right. Here, let's take a look at it. She works for an organization outside the EU. Her organization is working with business partners in the EU to facilitate the exchange of customer information. What is the best method she can adopt to ensure GDPR compliance? Right? So, is it within the same organization or within between two different organizations? Two different
Two different
organizations, right?
organizations.
So it is standard contractual clauses. Safe harbor, privacy shield, these are all distractors, correct? Remember, these are no longer, they have been struck down. We already said these have been struck down. Remember? Correct,
But
guys? Yeah.
Daniel, if it is going to be not used also, will there be questions around this safe harbor or privacy shield?
Of course,
On
they want to know if you really know the subject. They'll, in
no,
fact, sometimes they will give you some non-existent laws also. Right? There are distractors like this. Remember what I told you on day one. We'll come across some questions where they'll give you unnecessary information to confuse you. Right? Most important thing you must remember, if it's two different organizations, there's standard contractual clauses. If it is within the same organization, it is binding corporate rules. Right, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, good evening.
Okay, now come to investigations, right? So, what is an investigation? This is a lot.
Before
Read it carefully.
one minute, Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay, since we discussed about so many laws, acts, everything, is there any kind of a cheat sheet where we can at least look into just to understand a bit with one liner
The
of
slides
all
I'm
the.
giving you are the best cheat sheet.
Oh,
And all, see, there is a lot we have studied under GDPR. Believe me, you can't summarize it in one or two lines. And GDPR is critical. You'll almost certainly get one or two questions about GDPR. The critical provisions of GDPR you must know, right? Whatever we have studied, that amount you should know. Believe me, we have not gone deep into GDPR. There is a lot more. Okay? Okay, now what is an investigation? This is the rather convoluted definition by American National Standards Investigation, but it's a good definition. What is an investigation? It's a fact finding process of logically, methodically, and lawfully gathering and documenting information for the specific purpose of objectively developing a reasonable conclusion based on facts learned through the process. So, suppose you have to do an investigation, there's an incident in your organization, you're asked to do an investigation, all this you have to do logically, methodically, lawfully, come to a reasoned conclusion, no prejudices, no guesswork. Investigations can be of different types. One is administrative. There could be some misconduct by one of your employees. You may be asked to do that. It could be policy violation. It could be something minor. If it's a minor issue, you'll only give them a warning, counsel them. It could be major. It could even lead to dismissal. So your HR in all this should be involved. Sometimes you may come to know about some criminal activity that has gone on, suspected criminal activity. Determining whether a law has been broken or not is not our job. It is the job of the local, whatever, law enforcement agency. Our job is to alert them. As an information security professional, we should collect and preserve the evidence and assist them in doing their work. Sometimes there may be civil violations. Let's say some things we do which violate the rights of our customers. It could be even our employees. In such cases, there is a possibility that there may be a lawsuit. So you better keep your attorneys in the loop when you're doing this. Sometimes, if your regulators feel it happens, especially in sensitive industries like banks, you might have read in the papers central banks says carry out a forensic investigation into this because they feel that something is going wrong. So it is usually initiated by the regulators if they're suspected to be not in compliance. Our job again is to preserve evidence and assist them. PCI DSS we talked about, industry standards, these it's a contractual obligation. If there is a violation here, we may face some fines, we may even lose our license. Okay, I explained to you about enticement and entrapment. Actually, the slide should have come earlier. I apologize. Enticement means making a crime more tempting. We have a honeypot. We leave ports open, or we enable some services to attract a criminal. So, in enticement, the criminal had an intention because they have intruded or come into your network. Enforce and enticement is legal, and the evidence collected can be used. Attacker cannot evade responsibility. Entrapment is guy had no intention to commit a crime, but we are entrapping him. For example, we put a link on a server saying, okay, you can download the file. Once he downloads, oh, you took my intellectual property, and then you sue him. Entrapment is illegal because the guy had no intention of committing a crime and we entrapped him. Important thing. What is in red is important. In the examples I gave you, the distinction between enticement and entrapment is very clear. It's not always so clear. Sometimes when you're investigating, this line can blur. You have to make sure that you are not crossing the line and entering entrapment. If a court rules that what you have done is entrapment, then your evidence will not be accepted. Your investigation will fall flat. Right? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now we talk about standards, policies, guidelines, etc. What is a policy or a security policy? It's an overall statement by your senior management of what they expect security will do in the organization. When we have a security policy, it may be an organizational security policy or it may be issue or system specific. For example, we may have a change management policy. We may have a procurement policy. We may have an access management policy, right? This outlines the security program goals and responsibilities, and it addresses how we are going to comply with the laws and obligations. Remember this. Let's say a few of us are starting an organization. We have to create a security policy. What are the sources based on which we are going to adopt security policies? We already talked of framework. Okay, we can use the frameworks as a basis or take some relevant information. Are there any other important sources? Any other important sources? Your local laws and regulations, that has to find a place, right? Your local laws for whichever industry you're in says this has to be done, that has to be done. Obviously, that has to come into your policy. You'll also take into account best practices. Is that correct, guys? Guys and girls, is that correct? Hello?
That is
Yes,
correct.
sir.
Yes,
That's
yes.
correct.
Okay. Your policy should also give an indication of what is the acceptable risk appetite. Remember, we'll come to risk in a little while later. It's not something which you can always put a dollar value on. You may not be able to quantify it precisely. Your policy should be driven by business objectives. We already talked about this. Your policy should be in plain and simple English. Your junior most employee should be able to read and understand. It should encompass all your business processes and functions, right? I'll give you an example. I worked in an organization, very big organization. Our policy was no Wi-Fi. So we had no Wi-Fi policy. Suddenly we discovered in some obscure corner, some fellows implemented Wi-Fi. Because his branch is very nice. When they wanted to put routers and all, he said, no, no, I don't want you to spoil the layout of my branch. I will put Wi-Fi. Now the problem was there, encryption was taking place from the router, which means if he puts Wi-Fi from the user systems, it is going to the router unencrypted. We had to scramble to create a Wi-Fi policy. This is why when you're creating a policy, we should have a complete understanding of what is going on in our organization. A policy has to be reviewed periodically. You can't do it and say, okay, I have a policy. No, at least once in a year you should review it. Or whenever there are any major changes in your organization, in your environment, in your regulatory requirements, there may be issue specific policies, acceptable use, data protection, business continuity, change management, etc. What is the significance of a security policy? It shows the commitment of senior management. In many industries, I should say most industries, security policy is mandatory. It's essential for maintaining security. If we don't have a policy at all, how do we know we are secure? If we don't have a defined security policy, which has been approved at the highest level, we are obviously in big trouble, right? Correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, now policies tell you what is to be done. What about procedures? Procedures tell you how it is to be done, step by step. For example, your procedure will say in a particular application, how do you create a user account? You log in here, you go to here, you click on new account, all that. How do I assign privileges? The idea of procedures is it should be so granular that even somebody who's just joined your organization should be able to read it and follow. Standards are the minimum level of security that you require, right? This helps to ensure that your technologies, applications, and parameters are implemented properly. For example, you may have a secure configuration standard. My operating system should be configured like this. I don't use these ports, they should be closed. I don't use these services, they should be disabled. Hardware, I should block, let's say USB ports, I should block, right? How it will be. A baseline is the absolute minimum starting point. You say that my controls in my environment, this is the absolute minimum that is required in my systems. The baseline is important because let's say we are implementing a control. We have a certain baseline. It should meet this. When we make any changes in a system, make sure that it is not taking it down beyond the below the baseline. The baseline is the absolute minimum. A guideline comes in, suppose a policy requirement or a standard. There may be more than one way to do it. The idea of a guideline is to give you flexibility. Also, whenever you're being able to foresee what will happen, you have a clear standard. Why do we have a standard? Certain configurations are most ideal for for my systems. I'll do that. Sometimes something unforeseen happens. So that's why guidelines help us to interpret and understand standards and apply them. There could be a range of options. It's not just one option, there could be a range of options. This is why guidelines are not mandatory. Right? Remember this, guidelines are not mandatory. Yes, guys, now try answering this question. We just discussed it, right? Okay, good, good. Okay, now we come to business continuity requirements. Here we talk of business impact analysis, scope of the business continuity plan, and any external dependencies. So, guys, why do we need a business continuity plan?
So we need
It's
the business continuity plan. So let's say if something goes bad and we can't able to access the data or we can't work on the data, so we have a backup plan where we can leverage the data that is in backup so that we can have a business as usual activities going on.
Good, good, perfect. So, any organization can suffer disruptions. Why do we have a business continuity plan? Even if there's a disruption, we should be able to continue to provide services to our stakeholders. Correct? That's why we have. What is the first priority in your business continuity plan? Human life and safety. We also would like to minimize the impact of disruptions. Okay, tell me one thing, guys. When there's a disruption, will we always be able to give the same level of service?
No.
no.
No. But the idea is a
No.
minimum acceptable level of service we should be able to give. Correct?
Yep.
Minimum acceptable level of service we should be
Yes.
give. It may not be the same thing that we do normally. Then we should restore normal operations, and we want to minimize any loss. Financial losses, reputational losses, everything we want to minimize. Business continuity plan and DRP are similar. What is the connection? Actually, they're both related. They're in some places you'll find it in one document. DRP is tactical in nature. It is focused on IT systems. Your IT system should be available for a disaster. But there is more to recovering than just your IT systems. Think of DRP as a subset of BCP. It is tactical in nature, IT oriented. The idea your critical system should be up and running. But then that is not enough. For example, let's say your primary data center is in location A. Your business continuity DR site is in location B. There is some distance between these two. You have to make sure that your people can get there. This is part of business continuity. You have to have travel arrangements for them to go. You have to inform your regulators. There are requirements. Your regulators have to be informed. You have to tell your stakeholders. Also, when is the disaster over? When is the disaster over? When you come back to the primary site. Correct? So long as you're operating from the secondary site, the disaster is not over. What this means is in your business continuity plan, while some teams are going and starting work from here, There is a salvage team whose job is to repair the site, restore this so that you can eventually migrate back, right? Sometimes, remember, we may be doing things we may have some workaround. It may not be in the same way. So, all that should be able to do. We should be able to do. We should be able to explain to our customers, partners, shareholders, there's a problem, please bear with us, right? Okay. Disaster focused on IT systems, business continuity is broader. It includes risk management, oversight, planning to continue operating during a disruption. Incidentally, Tech Target is a very good website for related information. You can search for any topic. There are very good articles which explain it better than some of the textbooks. Okay, now come to business impact analysis. So, a business impact analysis is the process of analyzing the impact over time of a disruption on the organization, right? The longer it progresses, the more damage we will have. Remember, in your organization, there are multiple functions, there are multiple verticals. Are all of them equally important?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
Some of them are absolutely critical, right? So the idea of BIA is we want to identify which are the critical business functions in my organization and what impact will disruption have on each of these functions and what will be the overall effect on the organization as a whole. Critical business functions require a greater allocation of funds, operational resources to ensure business continuity. We have to identify the critical business functions. How do we do it? We have to ask all the stakeholders. It's not as though one or two of us can say, okay, this is obviously what are critical business functions, most of us can identify. But we have to take feedback from all stakeholders. You have to look at the regulatory requirements, ask your business managers, system managers, look at what your customers and suppliers say. For example, let's say there is some system which is doing very small volume, I mean, very small amounts involved. We may think this is not very critical, amount involved is very low. Then, when we look at the customer base, a huge number of our customers are dependent on this. If this goes down for a few days, those people are going to have a tremendous impact. Small businesses, we don't want that to happen. So, we may say this is also a critical business function, right? For every one of these, how do we determine this? We look at two aspects. One is the likelihood of the adverse event and the impact. For each of these, we have to look at factors like maximum tolerable downtime, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. Now, the point is, one moment. Okay. I mean, I'll finish this topic. MTDRTO, I don't want to go over it now. We'll do it in the next thing because we have to have some discussion, understand the chart, which I don't want to rush through. But some other things we can see. What are the types of disruptive events we face? Natural, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, etc. It could be human, cyber attack, operator error also, terrorist attack, etc. Environmental, like software error, telecommunication, or a power struggle. Okay. Now, this next part we will do in the next class because explaining this diagram, all that, I don't want to do it in a hurry. Okay, guys.
No problem.
So
Yes.
we can stop a little early. Of course, we can do one thing. We can discuss this from here. There's very little left, not much left, but we will do it in the next class. Actually, we're running a little behind, but that's okay. I don't want to rush through this. Yes, guys. So tell me, how did you find today's class? I think we learned a lot about law, right?
Laws and frameworks,
Yep.
mostly